What contenders have you seen for the world's stupidest criminal? My old roommate's a cop. He came home to tell me an ATM was robbed after hours for $15,240. The next day, the man who robbed the ATM deposited $15,240 into his personal account at the bank he robbed the night prior. I'll believe it, people are stupid as hell. There was this kid at my university the first year I was there. He ended up stealing a few books from the bookstore, so about $800 worth of stuff. Later the same day, he tried to sell them back to the bookstore that he stole them from. Yeah, it didn't end too well for him either. My mum's cousin was a bank robber. The time he got caught, he went into a bank, scoped the place out, left to go back to his bike — this motherfricker robbed banks on a frickin' bicycle — put the mask on, robbed the bank. The police see the tape, see that the bank robber was wearing the exact same clothes as the guy who left less than a minute before, and that was that. My ex stole a car and went to pick up his friend at the police station in said stolen vehicle. He parked right in front of a cop. The cop ran the plates and escorted him into the building. The next day, he was on the news as the most stupid criminal in town. A lot of people are asking me why I dated him. Well, he never told me that, to be fair. One day I decided to Google his name and I found the article. Learn from me, ladies and gentlemen. Google your partner's names. You never know what they're hiding. And yes, best thing I did was break up with him. Mistakes were made. Every day I see a big black SUV with sheriff written on the side parked in the driveway across the street. I don't know if the guy is the sheriff or works for them, but one night I woke up to a dozen sirens outside. Turns out some idiot tried breaking into Sheriff Dude's house while he was home, and his vehicle was right frickin' there. I knew a guy who got busted selling Mary J. He went to his hearing at the court and went through the metal detector with an Altoid tin full of E in his pocket. It set off the detector, sheriff's deputies searched him, found the pills, and arrested him on the spot. Look, criminals, I don't really want to tell you how to do your job, but it feels like this was such a no-brainer. If you really need to have your special treats the second you finish your trial, surely you can just leave it in your glove box. Were you planning on popping that in front of judge, lawyers, and bailiffs? A professor I had was a retired police detective. He told us about an armed robbery at a dry cleaner's in a bad part of town. When the robbers looked away, the cleaner's owner took the opportunity to grab a weapon and disarm the robber. The robber turned and ran, misjudged, and went through the glass door. Police arrived on scene and noted, among the shards of broken glass on the cleaner's floor, a hunk of something flesh-colored. It turned out to be a piece of human ear. Detective retrieves the hunk of ear and goes to the county's hospital emergency room. Shortly after the detective arrives at the ER, a man who matches the robber's description walks in, holding a towel to the side of his head. Detective asks to look and sees that a hunk of the man's ear had been cut off. Detective holds up the piece of ear he retrieved from the crime scene, and sure enough, it's a perfect fit. He places the man under arrest and waits while the ER doc sews the hunk back onto the arrestee's ear. He asks, "Why on earth did you decide to rob a dry cleaner's of all places?" And the arrestee replies, "I've been watching that dry cleaner's for a while. I'm sure they've taken a lot of cash. I noticed that there's an armored car there twice a day." The detective explains, "Yes, the armored car is there every morning to drop off police uniforms for dry cleaning and returns every afternoon to pick them up after they've been cleaned." Took a vehicle burglary report where the victim found a driver's license on her driver's seat that the suspect must have left behind. It seems damning, but if he had any criminal smarts, he'd just say his license was stolen and the thief would have dropped it while breaking into his new victim's vehicle. Without any other evidence, the case would have gone nowhere. The next day, I take a report at a church that was a couple of blocks away from the vehicle burglary. This guy stole the video cameras from the building. He must have thought the footage came with the camera because when we checked the video, there was a high-def close-up of the suspect's face as he removed the camera. Good evidence, sure, but I still didn't know who the guy was until I looked at the license I collected the day prior and saw that it was the exact same guy. My dad's a cop, and I remember that he called me one night and said he wanted to tell me how glad he was that I'm not as stupid as the guy he'd just arrested that night. An idiot high schooler was caught stealing booze after his fake ID was rejected. His fake ID said he was born in 2001, 3 years younger than he actually was. The poor guy couldn't work out why his ID didn't work. My dad recommended that he pay better attention in math class. I'm a 911 dispatcher in Florida. Sometimes confused or drunk people knock on the wrong door or try to get into a house thinking it's theirs, but it isn't. It's an honest mistake, but the homeowner is rightfully very afraid, thinking that they're about to be robbed or worse. Well, I had this kid, must have been in his early 20s and clearly on something, calling me going absolutely crazy that someone was trying to kill him and take his property and commit the unspeakable act on his girlfriend, etc. I send units code 3 to this guy thinking it's a burglary in progress. Turns out the guy just ordered a pizza and forgot about it. We scared the delivery guy half to death. Worked as a surveillance contractor and was asked to find footage of a copper heist. They'd been ripping all the external piping from old school buildings. It was crappy CCTV and at night, so not much hope of identification. A couple of cameras were offline, so I went back to check why. Turns out they came back a second night and ran out of copper to steal. Perfect face shots of the guy jimmying it from the front. He had his t-shirt pulled up over his face, and he'd quickly pull it back up as it fell off constantly. At one point, he yanked the cam down to reveal his partner being used as a stepladder. When Thief 1 got tuckered out, they swapped, and Thief 2 did the same thing. The constable took one look and was like, "Oh yeah, I know them. I'll go pick them up now." One of my finest moments was when I drunkenly gave a cop a fake ID and then said, "Oh wait, can I have that one back?" And he was like, "That one?" No. Can't go into too much detail, but one youth shot another in the leg after a fight in their apartment complex. The victim was able to describe the weapon the shooter used in detail. We got the perp's name from another kid who knows him from school. My partner looks up his Instagram and wouldn't you know it, there he is posing with the weapon described to us exactly. Social media is a treasure trove of wannabe gangsters incriminating themselves. Went to a job of 2 males attempting to break into a car. Job description said that they'd been at it for at least an hour. Got there, and the car was theirs. They'd apparently locked themselves out. Checks confirmed it did indeed belong to one of their mums. On their person was stolen mail and heaps of phones and new stuff in boxes in the car, so they got arrested for theft anyway. It ended up that the driver's door they'd been trying to break into was the only locked door out of the 4. It was unlocked everywhere else the whole time they were there. Mail turned out to be junk mail and 1 wedding invitation. Well, yes. I was about to say that you can't necessarily be blamed for being caught in an incidental search of their person, but those final details definitely launched these lads into the stupid criminal semi-finals. Well done, guys. A few more heists like this and you could take home the grand prize. Teen gets fired from Red Lobster, returns to rob same restaurant that night. They refuse to give him money from the register, so he grabs the charity coin box, muscular dystrophy or something like that, and then he leaves on a bicycle. I left to go find him and saw coins scattered about, followed the trail off some time which leads me to him hiding in the bushes at a church. Bicycle was leaning up against the bush that he was in. Oh, from my local newspaper. 2 young men in a pickup truck on a back road stopped a courting Amish couple in a buggy and told the couple to give them all of their money. Spoiler alert, the Amish generally don't have money. They do have good memories though and told the cops the license plate number. The inept criminals were locals too and should have known better than to try and rob the Amish. The Amish are not to be trifled with, see? They can and will aggressively hand-carve you a set of high-quality table and chairs. They can also weld like no one's business. Beware the Amish. We had an inmate that would constantly call Crime Stoppers on his contraband cell phone and try to get them to give him the reward if he confessed to his crimes. He did this several times a month. I'm not a cop myself, but about 10 years ago I got held up and robbed by a group of 3 guys with knives. All they wanted was the money in my wallet, so me being the smart guy not wanting to mess with knives just obliged. At the end of the ordeal, he put the knife to my throat and said, "If you ever tell the cops my name is," and gave me his name, "I'll slice your throat right now." So I went home, called the cops, told him where it happened and gave them the name the guy told me. The name instantly rung a bell with them since the guy had come into contact with the police in the past. The cops went to the spot where I was robbed, and they were laying an ambush for a new guy to appear. They could instantly identify the guy, he was arrested, and that's about it. It happened in the Netherlands. I don't know his sentence or anything. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I went to a domestic violence call where the woman claimed her husband had hit her. When I asked her how it happened, she told me he couldn't provide the kind of life she wanted him to give her. She stated since he had had a heart attack and got lupus, he wasn't working, so she decided she'd start inviting some friends over to do the deed with her for money. Mind you, she's telling me, a fully uniformed officer, all of this. She says he should act as the person who handles the money for her, i.e. her pimp. She then calls someone to come over and tells her husband that after she gets paid for the act, he should hold the guy at knife point and take the rest of his money. She said he refused to help her with this, so they got into an argument. He pushed past her to get out of the apartment. She claimed that was the attack that she had called me for. I asked her if she understood she had just admitted to planning a felony crime. She looked shocked that planning a working girl and robbery was wrong at all, and didn't get why I wasn't arresting her husband for trying to remove himself from her stupid plan to get them both arrested. For all of those asking if I arrested her, I did not. The husband is the real hero here. Due to him refusing to be involved in anything, this plan of hers never actually made it off the ground. If the victim had actually been invited over, I could have arrested her for an offense. I did write a report and passed it along to the robbery and vice units, as well as notifying my supervisors. Best I could do that night was separating them. I drove the husband across town to remove him from the situation. The penal code in each state differs slightly on what charges are considered arrestable while still in the planning stages. This wasn't something I could arrest on, mainly due to not having a direct victim I could point to. Basically, because this was a what-if scenario, it would be the equivalent of me mumbling to myself I should punch that guy in the face. If someone had been invited over or I'd gotten a name for the possible victim, I could have arrested her for it then. In short, being stupid and making stupid plans isn't a crime. Crimes require victims. My buddy is a cop and told me about this one kid in particular he dealt with for years. No cleverness to him, numerous times he walked into his neighbor's garage in broad daylight and just stole his bike. Constantly stole from stores in plain view, even the occasional minor attack or burglary. He always got caught, like never had gotten away with any of his hundreds of crimes, but because he was a minor, there were never any real repercussions. A few days before he turned 18, my friend and another officer went to his house to basically remind him that if he did anything after that, he'll face real punishment as an adult and he'll get 0 breaks. It was a last-ditch effort to be helpful. 2 days after his 18th birthday, he was caught committing an armed robbery. Pretty sure he's doing a few decades behind bars now. Not a cop, but worked at a 7-Eleven in a rough part of Chicago. Had 2 guys come in and ask for 2 bottles of Grey Goose. I asked for their IDs and they handed them over, and I grabbed the 2 bottles from behind the counter to ring them up. They proceeded to grab the bottles and book it out of there, leaving their IDs on the counter. I just called the police, they came in asking for a description of the thieves, and I handed them the IDs. The cops were in disbelief at the stupidity, left and went to the address of one of the IDs that was about 2 blocks away. About 15 minutes later, they walked in with the 2 guys and bottles of Grey Goose. The poor guys didn't even have the chance to open them. I confirmed it was them, didn't press charges, took the bottles of Grey Goose back, and went on with my overnight shift. Oh, sweet boys. Some people are too stupid to take seriously even when they try really criminal stuff. I have to imagine that they were shuffling their feet and looking at the floor like 9-year-olds caught sneaking around after bedtime. I got a call a couple of years ago to a lady who said she was being threatened. I respond to a very rural area, and she shows me her cell phone, and it's a chain mail text from an unknown caller. The message showed a picture of a girl with a gag in her mouth, and she's looking at the camera and holding a sign with both hands that said, "Help." The text of the message stated she was in Amsterdam, and if she didn't forward the text to 10 people, look what happened to this other girl who didn't. I explained to this lady that it was a hoax and explained what a chainmail message is. She refused to believe me and became argumentative. When I offered to contact Interpol for her, she didn't know what that was, and that wasn't good enough, and just kept saying the girl needed help. I asked her if she knew the girl, and she said no, and believed that the girl tried to send her the message using any made-up numbers she could, instead of contacting anybody she knew. My reasoning was once again shot down, and she said again that the girl just needed her help. I remember driving away and the lady screaming at me that I needed to help that girl, and I responded with a single no over my PA as I quickly sped away. Neither of those women were ever heard from again. Forward this video on to 10 people. So I was sitting at the station doing paperwork. Looking out the window, and a few yards away is a bus stop. A young lad is smashing the glass of the bus stop as a way of showing off to a couple of girls. So I sigh, walk about 20 yards over to him, and arrest him. Another time, a lad had just broken into a pharmacy and stolen some substances, sleeping tablets, which he'd started taking, maybe to hide the evidence. Who knows how these people's minds work? There's a foot chase which gets slower and slower and slower, and I ended up just slowly walking up behind him. The guy fell asleep while I was booking him in. Once, when I went to the grocery store, there were a few officers inside getting statements from some of the staff. Apparently some guy had dropped a gallon-sized Ziploc bag full of smack right on the floor while he was walking out. Staff members noticed it right away and called the cops, right before the guy came back into the store demanding that the staff return his smack. He was still arguing with and threatening them when the police walked in the door. There was a kid who sold substances on the floor of my college dorm who wasn't the brightest. One night he was driving back to the dorm and a cop car came up behind him and turned on their lights. This idiot stored all of his stuff in his car and assumed they were pulling him over for possession. He proceeded to drive through a red light and pulled into the dorm parking lot to hide. Mind you, his car was covered in bumper stickers, had a kayak rack, and a vanity plate to top it all off. The parking lot only had one entrance and exit too. Apparently he thought the police car wouldn't go through a red light to follow him. Long story short, they were just going to warn him for having a taillight out and nothing more. Instead, he ended up in a local jail and expelled from the college. The funniest part is that his ledger of all transactions and the dollar amounts, his products and buyers, was right there in his car. He was one stupid criminal. Ex-police officer here. I pulled over a guy for having a brake light out. Nothing serious. Ran his plates and the likes. It all came back clean and nothing seemed off until he exclaimed, "I haven't had any alcohol," in an over-enthusiastic tone. For some reason, he just thought saying this was a good idea. So, nearly got away with it. Vodka doesn't smell. I breathalyzed him, and the legal limit in England is 35. He blew over 60, arrested on the spot, and his vehicle was towed. Idiot. My father is a police officer. He once told me a story of a call he went to for reports of a man and woman fighting in an apartment. The call came from neighbors for noise complaints and concern. He was third shift, so this was at some point very late at night when all the crazy people were up and at him. When he arrived, he could hear the yelling through the door. He knocked and let them know it was the police. There was immediate silence and a man answered the door completely undressed. The exposed man didn't even give my dad a chance to speak or ask questions. The first thing he said was, "I don't have a knife behind my back." Well, he definitely did have a knife behind his back, and the woman he was with had smack, which is what they were fighting over. They both got arrested that night. Pro tip, don't do illegal substances, and if you do, don't answer the door for the cops. As a teacher, I remember asking a student who was looking a bit out of it what was up. Sleepily, she replies, "Didn't get much sleep." I ask her if everything's fine, as you'd normally do. "Yeah, it's okay. My uncle got arrested last night, though." The school was in a low socio-economic area, so it's not as unusual as you'd think. Anyway, she tells the story. "Uncle's so stupid. He and his mate thought it would be a good idea to steal a local ATM. They smashed through the windows, put chains around it, and dragged it out with their big truck. They decided it worked well, so they ended up dragging it all the way home." And she gives a half smile. "The thing is, the cops found them easy. They just followed the marks on the road all the way to the front door." I knew this kid in high school who got pulled over for a minor traffic violation. He decided it would be funny to jump out of the car and book it down the street. The cops, of course, go chasing after him, and after a couple of blocks he stops, puts his hands in the air and yells, "Psych!" The cops didn't think it was funny, so they tackled him to the ground and put him under arrest. His parents were wealthy, so he didn't get in that much trouble, but it was still so incredibly stupid. Just for the record, I think that everyone who's caught mid-crime should try this. It hurts nobody, and the idea of someone falling for it tickles me just so very much. Give it a go, bank robbers. You've got nothing to lose. See how it plays out. I'm Swiss. We got mandatory military service duty. When you do this, you usually get to keep your army rifle as a personal rifle at home for the following years, and every year there's a repetition course for about 3 weeks until you're 30 or something. During that time, you keep your weapon at home. You're supposed to keep it locked away, but most people I know just toss it in a corner of the attic or put it below the bed or something. And no, you don't get to keep any ammo. Anyway, a friend was having a party at home. Some friends called him that they're going to show up at his place soon. The door rings, and he's pretty drunk, and he thinks it's a fun idea to take the rifle, unloaded and without any ammo, but still, and open the door and point it out to scare his friends. Unfortunately, it wasn't his friends, but the cops, called by a neighbor because of the noise disturbance. I don't know all the details, but he doesn't have that weapon anymore. Still had to do the rest of his military service, but unarmed, which you can do without problems depending on your function within the army. He also probably paid a fine. Not a cop, but I used to work at a smoke shop. 3 guys broke in through a large window, left blood everywhere just trying to get in, walked right past the high-end, fancy, expensive glass and proceeded to grab as many cheap glass pipes as possible. They went back through the window, breaking 2 or 3 of these pipes in the process of crawling through the tiny hole they'd made, probably cutting themselves even more than they had already had, and hightailed it across the street. They seemed to have dropped damn near everything while running because there was literally a trail of broken glass leading to the apartment across the street. Cops came, followed the glass trail leading directly to someone's door, looked over the little fence to their bottom floor balcony and saw 3 guys all cut up, smoking from a broken pipe. We estimate they took 8 or 9 pipes. They were smoking with the sole survivor. They turned out to be regulars in that store. Never saw them again after that. Divorced men. What moment made you realize, it's time for a divorce? When my buddies approached me to complain that she kept sitting on their laps, wiggling and hoping for a reaction. You have some good buddies, man. Super awkward when your buddy's wife is finding any excuse to touch or rub you. If you say something, you risk causing a fight or him not believing you. If you say nothing, you're a bad person. I was a lance corporal bringing home scraps for a paycheck to an unemployed wife who one day brought home a brand new Lexus IS 350 because she got a good deal on it. Apparently, I was supposed to pay the $800 a month bill. I didn't think it was a good deal. My friend got a pretty substantial year-end bonus from work. He decided to use most of it for his wife's Christmas gift and pay off her remaining student loans, about $15,000, and the remaining portion to buy a new computer chair for when he gamed, about $300. Christmas morning, he was nice enough to let me stay at his place when I traveled for work. As he lived 20 minutes from the airport, we all woke up and had breakfast. His family and her parents came over and we started exchanging gifts. Besides paying for her loans, he had gotten her a few items. She opened the card saying her loans were paid off and she just sat there for a minute. After the silence, and assuming she was kind of in shock, she asked, "Did you seriously not get me anything else? I brought you that stupid keyboard." She got him the wrong one, by the way. "And you only got me a few things?" At that point, his brother-in-law and myself decided to hang out in another room for a while they ended up getting into a huge fight. A day later, when he was dropping me off at the airport, he told me he was going to visit a lawyer and get a divorce. I'd been seeing a girl for 6 months. I knew she was unstable and explosive, but I was in love with her good side and also kind of an idiot. She convinced me to move in with her, then convinces me we need a new kitchen, a new bathroom, a new couch, new TV, and she also needs a driver's license. Since she was permanently broke, I paid for it all like a good boyfriend does. Then I broke my leg. She took care of me for a few days, then said I could do my own grocery shopping and make my own dinner since she wasn't my mother. Mind you, we lived on the 3rd floor of an apartment building and there was no elevator, while I was up to my knee in cast. The week after, she went out with friends most nights of the week using my car and told me to do all of the groceries. When I didn't, she yelled at me that I was just leeching off her and that I was a lazy, worthless sack of crap just laying there on the couch that I bought, and that she always had to do everything and never got her anything. I turned down the TV that I brought, and for the first time since we'd met, I just gave in and let the hate flow through me, and blasted her with every B-word thing she did, just yelling from the couch, but it felt great letting it all out. She then kicked me out for insulting her and told me she'd been banging a dude from work all week anyway. Well, the losses up until that point suck, but it seems like you might have dodged a bullet in the long term there. Hope you got all your furniture back. When she falsely told our marriage counselor that I punched her. The next week, she denied saying it and accused our counselor of lying. He gave me a, "You should leave this relationship" look. I took that look as permission from a professional that I definitely wasn't making the wrong decision. Got divorced and never looked back. I legitimately feared for my safety toward the end. Not that she'd hurt me, but that she would make a false accusation to the cops or a crazy friend. She let me know she was pregnant and wanted my permission to tell all of her girlfriends during a girls' night out. Since I knew there was no possible way it was my child, she was also unknowingly admitting to having an affair. I can math, she can't. It was with her boss. We were at a point in our relationship where we were fighting all the time, so I just slept in the guest bedroom, so I wouldn't have to hear her screeching. But for some reason, on Father's Day, that's how I remembered the exact date, she came upstairs and basically forced herself on me. When she told me, "We're pregnant, I want to tell all my friends, oh joy!" I asked her when the doctor expected her due date. Then I did the math. 7.5 months does not a baby make. Finally got a prenatal paternity test out of her. I think she still believed she'd ninja'd my baby inside of her, and the truth came out, and I finally just told her, "Just tell me the truth, we can work through anything." Then she fessed up. My lie was that I was going to work through anything. I'd already had divorce proceedings in the works. Lawyered up the next day, and he ate her alive in court. I got primary custody of our child we already had, and child support, and a sheriff's notice that she had to vacate my home in 30 days. I never knew she could be that stupid. I realized when a friend's wife said to me, "You know, your wife is sleeping with my husband, right?" I mean, that's a pickup line if ever I knew one. I mean, we might as well. I knew mine was over the morning I saw a picture of some guy's eggplant on her phone. She was classy enough to bring him to the divorce proceedings. "Your Honor, I would like to present Exhibit D into evidence." When she staged a robbery of our house so she could fence off all of my stuff for smack money. When my stepdaughter became a teenager, my ex ramped up the nutso. She'd always been an impatient, angry screamer of a parent, but as my stepdaughter became a young woman, my ex just went crazy with envy or something. I know lots of mums have a hard time with teenage daughters, but their base-level patience is so much better than my ex's was. Threats of cutting the daughter's hair in the middle of the night while she slept, pulling hair, slapping face, ridiculing her in front of her friends, swinging something that missed, and putting a hole in the wall. I was out, and I took the kids with me. My wife was around less and less. Had to be free to live her life, go out with her friends. More often than not, she would call me to pick up our daughter from daycare, after promising to pick her up and have some girl time with her. She'd say to just tell the daughter she was working late or not feeling very well. She always had something better to do, and the kids were old enough to know better. I went to pick up our daughter one day, and when they called her name, she came running over until she saw it wasn't Mum, again, and slumped her shoulders and slowly walked over to ask, "What's her excuse this time?" That was the breaking point. I told her to get out, and even helped pay her security deposit to get her out. This one hits close to home with me. My dad and mom were never married, and I was 2 when they broke up, but my mom was supposed to be there for me. She would make all sorts of promises to come hang out with me and pick me up and do things, but 9 times out of 10, she wouldn't show. I remember getting excited if she showed up for one of my birthdays. How sad is that? She should have been there regardless. She always had these dumb excuses as to why she couldn't come. It broke my heart. My mom has been dead for 3 years now. I'm 22, and all I can think about when I think of her is I hope I never damage a child the way she damaged me. Tell your daughter some internet stranger sends her empathetic love. My wife made me watch Oprah, which was grounds enough, but there was also a quiz. It was an "is your marriage okay or not" kind of thing. In my head, I saw 7 or 10 items that were not okay. My wife didn't see any. We'd already been to counseling. Question 1. Does your husband enjoy watching Oprah? Her? Well, of course, he's sitting right here with me. Him? I wonder if I can accidentally pour bleach in my eyes. I was working on a mother-daughter scrapbook as a Christmas present for her. Was going through her Google Photos account looking for pictures of them together. I came across a selfie she took of some guy lying on top of her. Confirmed her second affair. I knew it was over the moment I saw it. That has messed me up pretty good. We flew across the country for her sister's wedding. She didn't say a word to me the entire time since we'd parked at the airport. Once we landed at our destination, we walked to baggage claim, absolute silence proceeding for several hours now. At the carousel, I picked up her bag when she took it out of my hands and calmly stated, "None of my family knows you're here." I told them I came alone. She walked out of the airport and left me there. Narcissistic personality disorder made for some really fun scenarios. During the last 1.5 years of our marriage, she became extremely psychologically manipulative. She was a narcissist, controlled my every move, would isolate me, refused physical contact. I was just an extension of her life. Was not allowed to talk to any woman and was not allowed to hang out with any friends or should just ignore me for up to 5 days at a time. Double standards everywhere. Verbal attacks, and the list can continue, but it hurts to think about. The last straw for me was when she threatened to kill me because I came home from work late, even though she knew I'd be home late. It was just a little too late for her, and she also threatened to hit me the same day. This was the second time this happened, and I talked with several people at work about it, and they suggested that I run. I had texts of the threats on my phone and contacted a lawyer that same week. She agreed to sign since I told her I would take severe legal action if she didn't. Thankfully, no children, and it was a clean divorce, and now I'm happily divorced. Yeah, look, I know that in some cases, divorce is rated as a highly stressful life event, immediately behind deaths in one's close family. But it doesn't always have to be that way. Unfortunately, it's probably only a good life event when it follows several years of extreme hardship. When she presented a picture of our 4-year-old daughter and me lying next to each other on the couch watching Blue's Clues to our marriage counselor as evidence of my inappropriate conduct around our kids. Thank God he saw right through that bullcrap immediately and told her to knock it off. We've been divorced almost 5 years now. The process isn't fair, but that really wasn't my ex's fault. No allegations of inappropriate behavior with my kids or misconduct were brought up against me during the proceedings, so that was all good. They wouldn't have flown for a minute in court anyway. Our kids are older now, and every day are becoming better equipped to see and understand the difference between what's reasonable and right and what's simply just bat crap insane. And it's not working out all that well for their mother, who hasn't changed her MO much, if at all, since we parted ways. So it goes. I'm happily remarried now with a woman with kids of her own. Kids who were friends and schoolmates of my kids before she and I even got to know each other. They're all our kids now. Life is good. No more shenanigans. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a friend who went through this, and there were so many lies leveled at him. At one stage, even his computer was seized by police after she alleged he had inappropriate material featuring children on it. It was so demoralizing. The only way he could see his kids was through supervised visits. A couple of things were in his favor, though. The staff where he had to go and see his kids could tell he was genuine. He never once reacted to his ex either, which showed his character. He'd completely lose his crap when it was just me and him, though, understandably. About 6 months in, the police returned his computer and found nothing, obviously. This was a major turning point for his case. His behavior throughout was spotless. He's actually a really gentle and caring guy. Meanwhile, his ex was racking up DUI charges, which also helped. That was around 4 years ago now. He's had sole custody ever since. Remarried to a nice girl who's their mom now. The ex just lost interest, which is sad, but good that she's not interfering also. I used to love doing chores for her because she loved being taken care of. When she stopped noticing, it started hurting. Then one day, I made a bench for our entryway out of barnwood. Took about 40 hours of work. She walked in the house after work that day and set her purse on it and proceeded to start the fight, where she told me that she was mad she got married to me. She stormed out of the house grabbing her purse. Never noticed the bench was there. I knew then, but I think she already knew. When my 2-year-old was learning to walk, he would constantly say another guy's name. Apparently, he was there from the moment I left for work until I got home. Single dad for 5 years with primary custody now. Finding her on Christmas Eve, still sending racy messages to a co-worker whom she claimed she was no longer in contact with, having been busted doing this to him previously. I cleared out of there like a blackjack dealer. When I, as the only earner in the house, was denied buying a new pair of work boots in December because she needed the money to buy vaccines for the puppies. She bred dogs as a hobby. I was a framing carpenter in Ohio. My current work boots were toast. Holes in both, no soles. I needed them. Her puppy vaccine story was bullcrap, by the way. Her hobby was dogs, but she was a pro at popping pills. That's what she needed the money for. I was done with her by March. When, after being in Afghanistan for 8 months, from May of 02 to November of 02, she was missing. She had my car. I found 2 random women with kids and pets living in the apartment I paid for. The electricity cut off, no money in my bank account, and a pay advance authorized by my commander, and a friend telling me to go easy on her because she was 5 months pregnant with his kid. Oh, and he'd had heart surgery to remove some kind of cyst from his heart just before I left. He was 23, had a pacemaker, and basically half a heart. If I scared him, he could die. I'd say that was the moment I realized. I hope you snuck up behind him and popped an inflated paper bag real aggressive-like. I found out she had cheated on me, and upon me confronting her to discuss it, she manipulated me into thinking she was about to take her own life. Then she admitted the manipulation. I was done. She may have once been a nice person, but that's all gone now. Forgot to mention that I found out because she had left her Facebook open with a conversation about her pregnancy scares with her friend. We hadn't done the deed in a bit more than a month. When she moved out while I was camping with 2 of our sons, and there was no discussion of whether her leaving was permanent or potentially temporary in her view. My neighbor's wife screaming "Puttana" downstairs after she caught my bride and her husband screwing in front of the fireplace. This happened to one of my parents' friends. Both couples did a swap and are now happily married. My dad cheated on my mum when I was 12. A couple of weeks after she kicked him out, my mum started dating my dad's girlfriend's husband. I hated all of them. Not my wife, but my fiancée. I just called it off because we were house hunting and she kept wanting to look at houses that would accommodate an extra permanent guest, her estranged father who she was wanting to reinitiate ties with, but she wouldn't admit she was doing this. I found out from a buddy that she was wanting me to lay out the money for the down payment and then was going to break it off herself and fight like hell to keep the house. 2 years down the drain, but a lifetime of fortunate near miss. When I saw the text to her lover that said something to the effect of, "I miss your eggplant in my butt," and "I had some fun in the gym shower thinking of you," B-word never sent me texts like that in 10 years of marriage. I still have the text saved somewhere in the divorce file. This was not the first affair, but it was the one that finished it for me. I endured a physically, emotionally, and mentally taxing relationship for over 6 years with my first wife, 4 of which we were married for. There were many, many instances that should have caused our marriage's demise. The proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, though, was 8 days after I had major oral surgery. Due to a freak medical occurrence, I had to have 28 teeth cut out and 2 holes drilled into my sinus cavities from top of the back of my gums. She and I were in a grocery store parking lot, and I asked her not to start an argument in the store because it's a small town and I was so tired of being those people. Her reaction was to backhand me in the mouth 6 times. Or at least I counted 6 times because I'm pretty darn sure I lost consciousness. I just remember waking up when we were pulling into our driveway while she's freaking out because my face is against the window and blood is coming from my mouth like a fountain. From those of you wondering why I picked a forum from the perspective of the husbands rather than both the spouses, let me just say I don't enjoy reading stories like the last one, and they are a lot more prevalent from the wife's perspective, sadly. So try to view it less as cherry-picking and more trying not to get too dispirited with my work. This video should not be taken as an indication that women are more awful than men in these situations. When she said, "You didn't pray hard enough and that's why our son has cancer. That's why I'm sleeping with my prayer partner," that woman takes the cake for queen of rationalizations. This is the first one that made me look up and mouth, "What the frick?" I was at work and got a call from my grandparents that she had shot our dog Zoe that was laying on the bed with her. We were separated before that for other reasons, but that's when I ponied up a few grand and went to an attorney to file. I really miss her. The dog, I mean. I left for work at 6 a.m. and forgot to unplug the toaster. When I arrived home at 6 p.m., I was given the "everything you've ever done to tee me off" speech, just for leaving the toaster plugged in. I asked her what she did all day that prevented her from unplugging it herself. Another long speech about why I'm the butthole. I said something to the effect of, "Quit acting like your fricking mother." She threw the cat at me. A cat. She threw a fricking cat at me. Scuba Steve went on to live with me after the official separation and divorce. Our marriage ended after our daughter at 3 years old told us to stop yelling. When she asks me to take the kids on some errands, has kept me celibate for months, saying she just doesn't want to do the deed with anyone anymore, and once I leave, invites some guy over to tongue lash her for 45 minutes, and then drop a load inside her in the bedroom without using protection, all on the day before Father's Day. Thanks, Amy. Not divorced yet, this happened last week. Her life is in such a shambles, I'm not even mad. I was on deployment and she yelled at me for interrupting her family's celebration when I called on Christmas. The first time I thought it, I was working late and the daycare calls and asked if I'm picking my kids up. I left work to go get them, and when I got home, she was gone. Didn't hear anything from her for 2 weeks. For the second time, I'd bailed the house out of foreclosure 3 times because she wouldn't pay the bills, even though there was money in the accounts to cover it. I closed the account, handed her cash for the mortgage, packed a bag with my kids, and left. We had a trial separation and lived apart for a month. During this time, I vented off some of my frustrations to one of my best friends. Come to find, said friend was effing my wife behind my back. They both attempted to manipulate my emotions so I wouldn't think anything was suspicious, but goddamn, my intuition always had my back. Always trust your gut, folks, even when your head isn't where it should be. When I found evidence of the last affair, as soon as I heard it, I knew it was the end and there would never be anything else there. I found out on a Sunday. First thing Monday, I was scouring the internet for a place to rent. I kept her in the dark for the next month until everything was set. When she got home from work, I handed her my ring and told her I wanted a divorce, and I left. We met and spent the first 7 years of our married life on the West Coast, then moved east. 5 years later, I took a job on the West Coast, but it was middle of the school year, so I went out ahead and lived on my own until everyone could join me. Things hadn't been very good between us for a while, but I hadn't articulated it to her, or even myself beyond vague feelings of dissatisfaction. One weekend, out there on my own, I decided to take a day and drive to one of my favorite towns, a town in which I'd lived long before I knew her, a town we had visited often while married. It was late afternoon, and I was about to head back to my hotel when I realized I could visit a particular beach that had a special meaning to me from my earlier life there. I stopped at a convenience store, grabbed a Grolschleich that I used to drink on that beach, and drove out there. Hiked out to a specific spot I remembered, sat down, popped the beer, and looked out over the ocean. And it hit me that I hadn't done that in over 20 years. Whenever we'd visit the area, I'd suggest stopping down at the beach, but she wasn't interested and would always veto the idea. I'm sure reading this it seems like the tiniest thing, but it was the catalyst for me realizing just how completely dissatisfied I was with our relationship. I think from the time I sat down, I knew it was over within maybe 10 minutes, just sitting there, sipping my beer, looking at the ocean. When we went on family vacation, and I hoped she'd sleep the entire time so I could have fun with our son. My sister said something similar about her ex. He had to go out of town for a business trip, and she found that being a single parent was less work than having him be around. Then he did the deed with one of her friends, and her first thought was, finally, an excuse to kick him out. Feels like vacations are a good litmus test to see if you're both still in love. There's a sports journalist I follow who takes his wife on holiday every year to do a sort of intervention to reassess their relationship and family goals. When I went on my final vacation with my family, parents and brother included, everyone just fought with each other, and it made me realize how dysfunctional we were, and that it was just better for me to move out ASAP. What was one rule that was implemented at your school that backfired horribly? My senior year of high school, we got moved into a new school building across from the grocery store. The builders put up walls over the plumbing for water fountains by accident, so there was a huge increase in reusable bottles, and the school put up a vending machine entirely full of water. Now I suppose it's time to mention that this was in Washington State, where you can sell liquor in grocery stores along with anything else. So, some freshman got the bright idea to start stealing vodka from the store across the street, fill disposable waters with it, and sell it to other students. This caused a huge problem with a large population of drunk underclassmen wandering the halls of the school and getting into trouble. Finally, the staff got together for a meeting about what to do. Someone suggested banning water bottles. So now students had no access to water during school hours, and everyone was enraged. There were articles written about it and parents complaining. People all over town were talking about how we had a ban on water. They eventually lifted the ban and the alcohol problem resumed. In conclusion, my school had kids selling booze in water bottles and banned water. In the late 90s, humorous graphic tees became a popular thing, and the mall had a few stores that sold questionable taste shirts. Shirts that said several things the narrator can't repeat on YouTube. Splooge donor, a headless guy holding a sign that says "will work for head," that kind of thing. The school made a rule that if your shirt was inappropriate, you would have to turn it inside out. A kid in my class shows up to school with a shirt that says, "I'd rather be playing with myself." The teacher sends him to the bathroom to turn it inside out. He returns with an inside-out shirt that says, "I put the FU in fun." The teacher doesn't realize it's the same shirt, so he takes it off in class and shows her both sides. He had a few shirts custom-made with prints on both sides. She asks him if he has another shirt in his locker, and he says, "I have my gym clothes." She told him to get the other shirt and change. He walks back into class with a shirt that says, "You're driving me knucking futs." The teacher just says, "Go to the office." So he goes to the office and tells them that he was sent there because of his shirt. So they say, "Turn it inside out and go back to class." So he turns his shirt inside out and walks back to class with a shirt that says, "Free mustache rides." She said, "Did you go to the office?" And he said, "They told me to flip it inside out and come back to class." The teacher sighed and said, "Just sit down." She went about teaching and we thought he had won, but he ended up getting suspended for 3 days. When he returned from suspension, he wore shirts for probably a whole week that said, "I love teachers, support your local teachers union, cops are the good guys, substances are bad, wash behind your ears, etc." It was funny because he made these overtly positive shirts and the teachers and students would try to read into it too much to see what they really meant, as if it was just a tongue-in-cheek thing that they didn't get. Eventually, one of his positive shirts that he'd found said, "Support single mums," but he claims he didn't realize that there was a silhouette of a woman on a pole. He says that he thought it was just a woman, so he got suspended again. As a side note, the same kid bought a blow-up doll and took her to every football game, basketball game, pep rally, and a few other things, and gradually worked her into official school functions and brought her to school several times. For whatever reason, the teachers just gave up on that one. We passed her around over our heads at graduation. He even brought her a cap and gown. I'm friends with him on Facebook and he's a truck driver and bodybuilding enthusiast. The guy is jacked now at 39 years old. Sorry, nothing since then to add to his shenanigans. Haha, I have to admire the kid's pre-planning and commitment to that bit. Honestly, the shirt gig took some work and investment. He might have been a class clown, but I'm sure he's smart enough that he's doing fine. My middle school had a no-touching rule, which meant you'd get suspended for high-fiving a friend. Girls got in trouble for hugging their friends. Our teachers thought this was ridiculous and would have students high-five each other in their classes for a minute every day. So many kids got suspensions that the rules stopped being enforced and only counted if you touched a kid in a bullying situation or inappropriate way. Not sure it was exactly a rule, but my middle school once encouraged kids to not touch each other at all to reduce physical altercation cases, even friendly gestures among friends. All that did was get the kids running around touching each other around campus for about a month and a half, screaming, "I've been attacked!" as they did so. To add insult to injury, they did it twice as often in front of the admin who made the presentation about it. Our middle school banned high fives when I was in 8th grade for being disruptive, so everyone switched to the most obnoxious high elbows possible. In my dorm, if you did something that triggered the smoke or fire alarm, you had to do a safety presentation for everyone on your floor. This was intended to deter pranksters from pulling the alarm. A guy on our floor was making grilled cheese in the kitchenette and burned it, which legitimately triggered the fire alarm. Afterwards, he explained, assuming that since it had been a legitimate alarm and not a prank, that he wouldn't have to do a presentation. He was, of course, wrong. So the next Wednesday night, the entire floor assembled and we were treated to a 30-minute safety presentation on the dangers of grilled cheese sandwiches. It contained literally nothing about fire safety, it was all about choking hazards and cholesterol. Our residential advisor was furious, but the student pointed out that the write-up that had been given just said, "safety presentation." We didn't get any more presentations after that. My high school made students wear these neon t-shirts that read, "dress code violator," if their outfit didn't adhere to the school's policy. They became so popular that the school began selling them 1 week later. At my college dorm, we used to have this thing called Malt Mondays. Someone would go around knocking on doors at 8 or 9 p.m. asking if you wanted to order a 40-ounce. Then they would go on a run to the liquor store and buy them for people that had ordered them. We would then all hang out outside, drinking 40s and listening to music until security came and told us to take it inside. It was a fun tradition we had, but the dean hated it. He decided to fund his own Malt Mondays, but instead of malt liquor, he wanted to draw people in with free chocolate malts. What ended up happening is people who did the regular Malt Mondays and wanted a chocolate malt would just go to that one first, get a free treat, and then leave and go drink 40s. If you returned a library book late, your parents would have to return it and explain why it's late. It worked about as well as you'd think. The rule lasted a few months before they figured out it wasn't worth the cost of replacing all the books. My 4 years of high school were full of my school trying out new policies and procedures to use in the future. My sophomore year, my school decided to make tests count for 100% of the grade, and homework count for 0%, but it was still assigned. And as you'd expect, kids did absolutely no homework. The ones that didn't retain information well, or were bad test takers, struggled pretty hard to make the grade without homework padding it. Our failure rate was pretty high that year. Then, my junior year, they brought homework grades back and made a new rule that there was no due dates nor penalties for turning in late work for your 6 weeks. We didn't do quarters. As long as it was before the next 6 weeks started, you were good. This led to students doing no homework until the last few days of the 6 weeks, and teachers had to accept and grade them all before grades were due. This put teachers under an immense amount of stress by causing them to work insane hours and spend every hour at home grading, which made them very irritable and more likely to just shove pointless activities and busy work at us until they could finish grading. This was actually in the news a couple of months ago. We had a really hot summer last year, and the boys at my little brother's secondary school were mad that they couldn't wear shorts, but the girls could wear skirts. The junior leadership team brought it up at a meeting, and the head teacher jokingly went, "All right, if the boys want to wear skirts, then let them." A group of boys went to school wearing skirts the very next day. The day after that, it wasn't just one group of them. And that, children, is how Scotland was born. I can't for the life of me understand how nobody saw that coming. I mean, you give teens literally any out to make a scene and mess with their teachers, and it's gonna happen. A school in my area jacked up the cost of the parking pass. People protested by not buying the pass. Instead, they rode the bus. Funny thing is, the county really relies on juniors and seniors driving because they don't have enough buses for all the students. The parking pass fee dropped. People drove again. Don't ever let them tell you driving to school is a privilege. They need you to drive to school. Now that's a lesson in economics. High school took all of the stall doors off the boys' bathrooms because of graffiti or something, so I started pooping in the bathroom near the office. After a couple of times of the superintendent coming in while I was doing that, all the doors were put back on. Did you maintain eye contact and nod as the superintendent walked by? "What's up, Mr. S? Got any good reading material?" You now need 40 hours of community service to graduate. It's recommended that all freshmen do 10 hours a year, while the seniors start as soon as possible to get the 40 hours out of the way. The rule was gone the day before graduation because they would have had less than a 10% graduation rate that year, and it would have made the school look terrible. They did this to try and increase their reputation of being a good school. All the other schools in the area are trash though, so I don't really know why. My school implemented the 40-hour volunteer rule when I was in high school too, except the way they did it was that the incoming seniors, my class, had to do 10, the class below us 20, next class 30, and the incoming freshmen would have to complete 40 by graduation. That way they avoided the situation you described, and as far as I know, the 40-hour rule is still in place. My high school told my senior class, "No senior pranks or none of you walk." Ha! Result: we didn't throw a prank. Instead, we threw the biggest rager of the year on school property with the permission of the county sheriff, as long as we took our bottles home when we were finished. The sheriff retired the next week. He was a real one. Aftermath, the administration was teed off but couldn't pin it on the senior class because Sheriff Rick couldn't remember which kids were there. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. They started a no chewing gum rule that made a lot of junior kids start a black market for gum. This has probably happened lots of times. One of my teachers spotted a guy chewing and gave him the usual, "Well, I hope you brought enough for everybody," whereupon he got up with a fistful of gum and started handing it out. She didn't send him to the principal, but she never tried that line again. My junior high school adopted a policy to not allow kids to loiter in groups of 5 or more, in an attempt to crack down on gang mentality. This was frickin' junior high. Anyway, me and my group of misfits, 6 of us, were always hanging out during free time, and the principal eventually stopped us and asked us to separate. I had to casually explain to him that we were not a group of 6, but 2 groups of 3 that were intermingling. People caught wind, and that rule was basically dead. That was one of the few times I had to explain to my father why he was called into the principal's office with me. "I hate to bring you in, sir, but I think you'll want to hear this. Your son has more than 3 friends. You really should be ashamed of how you've raised him." My senior year of high school, some guy in my class got an in-school suspension for wearing a headband. He had long curly hair, by the way. So the next couple of weeks, almost every guy on the football team started wearing headbands in protest. Keep in mind that girls could wear headbands, just not guys. No one really understood this rule. Did the rule get removed after the protest? It did. They tried suspending a couple of the guys on the football team, but as with most places, football was so important that they couldn't suspend everyone because this took place right in the heart of football season, so they eventually just gave up.
When I was in high school, a guy on the football team got suspended for fighting.
A few of his friends started vandalizing places around campus in protest. They used paint and markers to write messages about getting the suspension revoked or letting him free and other bullcrap. Anyway, the dean was super teed off. He called an assembly and ranted about how much trouble these people were in, saying the police were already involved and expulsion was a serious possibility. Well, when the three guys were caught, it turned out to be the star quarterback, star running back, and star lineman. I think they only ended up having to pick up trash after school for a couple of days. Yeah, this is funny but also incredibly unfair. I remember that an otherwise well-behaved kid could get lunchtime or after-school detentions for their first offense. But the kids on our sports teams, who were often not very well-behaved, could regularly get off with nothing if there was an important game that week. Complete horse crap. A local pharmacy was built on the same street as my school, and local pharmacies got robbed a couple of times a year where I live. To make our school more secure, they started locking every door and making it punishable by detention for any instance of a student opening an outside door for someone else during school hours. Everyone had to go through the front door to the lobby to show ID and sign in before they got into the actual school. I liked how secure the school was, but when our principal was walking superintendents around to show them our new media production and medical sciences wing of the school, they got locked out after stepping outside to look at an outdoor set. That spot was on the complete opposite side of the school from the front office. During class change, they tried knocking on the door to get a student to open it. Everyone ignored them and then followed the rules. These old men and ladies had to walk around the school in 95-degree, 90% humidity weather, sweating their suits off. Our principal did commend all the students for following the rules at the next school assembly and said he was proud to show how safe the school was. Cool dude. We have a similar policy where outside doors are locked and people have to be screened in through the front door. The only issue is when you come to the front, they just let you in without checking any ID or anything. It's just extra walking. No running during recess. The rule was made because some kid in the second grade ran and tripped. So for whatever reason, they restricted running for all grades, kindergarten through 5th. Everyone should know that when you ask a 5 to 10-year-old not to do something, that's the next thing they're going to do. They started running in the halls, the cafeteria, the classrooms, and you bet your butt they ran outside. After a week, the teachers stopped enforcing it and everyone stopped caring. Kids need to run. They just need a designated time and place for it. Something like a break in between classes designed for physical activity, maybe. An insane amount of time and hand-wringing went into my office's dress code policy. When the final draft was ultimately released, every department head had a valid reason why their staff should be exempted. So the policy wound up only affecting myself and the guy that insisted on making the policy. I violate this policy on a daily basis. When I was in kindergarten, during the morning announcements one day, they came on and said, "And please, no throwing snowballs. There's a chance you might accidentally get some rocks in them." And you could see the faces on all 20-something students, the realization of, oh my god, we could put rocks in them. Haha, kids are such buttholes. I went to a private school for elementary where uniforms were strict. If you didn't wear a belt, you'd go to the principal's office and he would make you use a shoestring. Well, when he opened the drawer, there were like 6 different colors and everyone thought it was really neat. So for a short period of time, there were a bunch of kids coming to school with no belt so they could wear their lime green shoestring belt. My high school has a policy where you couldn't wear hats at school unless the school's mascot logo was on it. So a bunch of people just bought a patch of the logo and paper-clipped them to their hats. In my high school, they banned backpacks in classrooms. Everyone was teed off. Some girls started bringing bigger purses to put their books in, so a bunch of dudes brought their mums' purses in and were using those for school books. Administration and teachers got upset because we found loopholes, so they banned purses too. At which point, a bunch of mums got upset because their daughters had to carry around sanitary products and other stuff in their coat pockets, in addition to all of their books, notebooks, calculators, pens, pencils, and whatever else they have in those purses. Finally, the school let everyone have their backpacks back. They made a new rule where we had to ask permission to use the restroom during lunch.
We all coordinated and the whole cafeteria would raise their hands at once and request to go. They responded by sending us two at a time. We did this for a few days, then changed our procedure to everyone just getting up at once and going to the restroom without permission. They didn't ever officially do away with the rule, but the teachers on duty at the lunchroom just stopped enforcing it. Zero tolerance, which means if you're involved with fighting, you'll be kicked out. No questions asked. They thought it would mean no more fighting. No, it means that if the bully is beating up a kid, no one would step in for fear of involving with the fight and getting kicked out. No one would snitch because it means the bully will target you next, and now you're involved in fighting and get kicked out. It's a crap policy. I remember reading once on here that some kid was getting bullied and not even fighting back. He fell victim to this, so the parents went into the principal's office to talk to them about it. They reiterated what this zero tolerance meant. So the dad turns to their son and says, "Okay, next time they bully you, absolutely destroy them. Break their faces." What? You can't tell them to do that.
You just told my son that no matter what, he's going to get suspended. So this is what he has to do to protect himself. Yeah, I can see the argument for this kind of policy, but it really has to be enforced by security cameras or a really vigilant investigative process after the fact, to make sure that victims aren't the ones who end up getting punished. My high school attempted to ban trip pants and the like. However, due to a hilariously overlooked typo, the student handbook that got sent to students and parents just said, "Students may not wear pants." We had a good laugh and it made the local news. Unfortunately, this does show the quality of high school I went to. I wasn't ready for college.
Students may not wear pants? Shows up in a kimono. Or interpret it the British way and go to school commando, though that's really unnoticeable.
My high school had a really bad problem with students showing up to class 5 minutes late every day, so they tried 3 different solutions. First, they stopped letting us use lockers. They quickly found out that just meant nobody brought their books to class. Next, they decided to ban the use of restrooms during class periods. Teachers started complaining about everyone asking for a bathroom pass as soon as class started, so that was abandoned after a week or so as well. Lastly, one week they made a ton of announcements Monday through Wednesday that all students were to be on time for class. Then on Thursday, they suspended any student who was late for insubordination. Turns out that included half the football team. This occurred right before the biggest game of the year. In a town of like 4,000 people, this game attracts 16,000. So yeah, they gave that up as well. There was a rule they put in place my freshman year of high school that if you arrived late, i.e. after first bell, you couldn't park in the parking lot. You'd have to park at the gas station down the highway and walk to school, making you even more late. It stopped after 20 or so people intentionally showed up late and made a mass exodus along the highway. On top of that, a lot of parents whining about it. If you had 4 tardies in one semester, including first or 0 hour, you would receive a Saturday morning detention. I'd accumulated 3 tardies during a semester of my sophomore year because my ride would be a few minutes late. I proceeded to skip school anytime my ride or myself would be late, and eventually a vice principal noted my absences. Naturally, he asked why I was missing so many days of class. I explained to him that I wasn't going to get a detention for going to school. His only recourse was to suggest that I try to be on time more often. Felt good to walk out of his office knowing that conversation didn't go how he expected. We implemented the buddy bench for lonely people to sit on and make friends. It was pretty damn expensive and nicely decorated. Someone stole it.
As an adult, I love that idea in theory. As a former high school student, I fear for the safety of the poor kids who are so lonely they'll sit on a bench that specifically isolates and highlights their loneliness.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice idea if you're talking about confident adults who just happen to not have someone to have some small talk with and want to do so. I've seen the same thing in public transport stations, and I often see like an old man or something sitting there just looking to have a short, nice conversation while waiting for the train. For kids going through puberty though, people will think it's sad and it'll just isolate them further. My school banned all balls over a couple of inches in diameter because someone kicked a football through a window during lunch. Most of us that walked home walked past the woods by the golf course and had a ready supply of golf balls as a result. Golf balls were allowed under the new rules due to their size. 3 broken windows in one lunch period, and later, they weren't allowed. There was a sign in the boys' bathroom asking not to bounce balls on the walls. You can bet that wall got humped a lot. What was your worst "sucks to be right" moment? I have, to this day, been 100% accurate on how terrible guys that my lady friends, ones that I'm not interested in,
Should avoid. One of my friends got syphilis from one guy because he was messing around with 3 other girls at the time. Another entered into a very upsetting and tumultuous relationship with another scumbag. There are others, but they just never seem to believe me when I can pinpoint scumbags. I bet we're being acquired and all losing our jobs. Whole company meetings aren't fun. Internet-based company, the internet went down for 30 minutes. Everyone was getting ready to go, and I was just about to shut down my machine when the net came back online. I decided to announce said fact. You sound like a butthole. He sounds like the guy who reminds the teacher about homework that was due. It was one of those not thinking at all moments, guys. I was staring at my screen while Windows closed, and up popped, "Connected to the network." Stupid, yes. Malicious, no. When my girlfriend told me she was pregnant for the first time, I told her we had to wait to tell her parents because we needed to get a lot more support from various other people before telling them. I knew her mother's reaction would be bad. She told her mother over the phone the next day. Just as I'd predicted, her mother reacted very, very badly and proceeded to ruin the next 3 years of my girlfriend's life. I wondered out loud if my little sister had an eating disorder. Whoops. I was doing dishes one night when my sister came home. She said, "Guess who died today?" I randomly said, "Michael Jackson." Let it be known that I never saw or heard the news that day. Another one, my friend was posting sad things on the internet. My other friend and I weren't sure why, and I took a guess. Maybe his guinea pig died. Sure enough, it was announced the next day. I remember when Michael Jackson's death got announced at my work, there was a moment of grim silence before a coworker shouted out, "Yes! My records just went up in value." Good times. My mum got pregnant and told me at about the 5 to 6 weeks stage. The first thing I did was rain on her parade and warned her not to tell everybody until it's past the safe stage. She told fricking everybody. People even threw parties for her. 2 weeks later, she lost it. I wore a seatbelt when no one else in the car did. There were 4 of us in the car. I was fine, 2 others were decently hurt, and one guy was tossed through the windshield and hasn't walked since. I'm sorry to hear that. Was drinking involved? Sorry for asking. Not at all, actually, which is the question we always get. It was icy and visibility was crap. High speed was the ultimate issue in the end. I told my mum that if she didn't do something about her weight, she'd get diabetes. I didn't think she'd lose her legs, though. This hits close to home. My father is a diabetic and he doesn't take care of himself at all. I hope your mother is doing okay despite everything. Well, she did end up losing the weight in the end. I was sure my sister was the product of my mother cheating on my father. My mother was very close friends with a neighbor and would spend lots of time at his place at night. When my sister, who is considerably younger than me, was born despite my father being away for most of the year, I was pretty sure. She finally admitted it to me over summer. My ex-wife defended a guy that was remodeling her mum's house after I said that I thought he smelt like horse crap. I saw the way she looked at him and called her out on it, asking if there was anything I needed to worry about. That Friday, we got into some bullcrap argument, and guess where she went? She spent the weekend with him. Marriage over. When I said that my mother wasn't coming back, read ever, to pick up my siblings. My mother wasn't the best one on the planet. She gave me up to my grandparents when I was young, and later, after I turned 18 years old, she left them at my doorstep with no warning or explanation. It wasn't the first time they'd been left at my place with no warning, but somehow I just knew that in this case, she wouldn't be back in a week after whatever substance binge she indulged in. I just knew that this time she wouldn't come back at all. I ended up spending 3 years working 2 different jobs at a time instead of going to college in order to take care of them. I didn't see her again for 10 years after she initially left them at my place. To be honest, I could have done without seeing her for another 10 years. I told my mom that she would die before the year ended if she didn't listen to doctors' advice about her medical problems. She died on December 8th. Recently, and I never found the article in question, a friend was browsing on his phone and said, looks like we just signed a law that makes it legal to pay offshore workers 15% less than local workers. To which I replied, well, I guess that means I just lost my job. I walked in Monday and bam, we're all getting laid off. 35-year-old here, so I have a more long-term strategy, but every day I see people, friends and family, struggle with stupid crap that I've tried to let them know about, in as friendly a way as possible for years. I've known probably 100 people throughout my adult life, and about 20 are kind of screw-ups. I won't go into all, but one of my friends has an ego and thinks he's always right. He interrupts everyone with really argumentative statements to prove his intellectual superiority. Picture a person whose life really reflects a Redditor. Instead of comments being posted anonymously, he says it right to their faces. I knew this guy, who is damn smart, 99 percentiles in every test, yada yada, and would suffer from unemployment and relationship issues. He's been like this since he was 19. He's 36 now and just struggles with life. He's unemployed because every boss hated him. He goes out with girls on one date and then gets incredulous when they aren't into him. He goes on a date with a nice girl, but since she's not a knockout 10 out of 10, he dismisses her. I saw this in his early 20s and I knew he would suck when life got serious. And it did. And what really sucks is that he's a really nice guy who means well. I try to help him out and steer him to humility, openness, and pleasant conversations, but to no avail. Despite what I've said, he's a good friend who really deserves better. And yes, it freaking sucks that I'm right. This is one of the few times that I've wanted to be wrong in terms of reading a person. Check out the woeful prophet here. Honestly, it can't be easy making friends with the kind of person who calls people on their crap either. It's gotta be a lose-lose, right? I thought my ex was cheating on me, and well darn, I was right. Same. My girlfriend and I worked together at a bar. Sunday we were working and she's flirting with a wine rep. I called her out on it and she tells me to calm down. Wednesday, I get off work and she didn't come home until 3:30 a.m. I found out she was out with the same wine rep all night. Yesterday, I broke up with her. It sucks to be right. She was later fired for being too drunk at work on a Sunday. Bullet dodged. When I was in high school, I thought my secret crush was a person playing a prank. Oh, right in the nostalgicals. When my ex-wife was acting strangely after a year clean, I found Lortabs and Vicodin in her purse. One day, after talking to my friend on the phone, I get this niggling feeling that something wasn't right. She had been depressed lately, but suddenly she was cheerful and happy.
I was really worried she was planning something stupid. She ended things that night.
I'm really sorry to hear that. I've heard before that if a person like that is suddenly in a positive, outgoing mood, it can be attributed to the fact that they're happy to know their time will soon be up. Simply devastating to think about. Hung out with a former coworker I hadn't seen in a while. He told me he liked to stand on the train tracks until he heard or saw a train coming, and that had been waiting longer and longer to move. I told him it was a bad idea, but didn't make a big deal about it. A few months later, he waited too long. My mum was a severe alcoholic who also happened to tend bar. About 6 years before she passed, she started to have seizures while in withdrawal. Electrolyte imbalance in my best guess. She had one on a concrete floor and it fractured her L2 and L3 vertebra. When this happened, she gave up on life. She lived with her father, laid in bed 22 hours a day, and tried to fight for SSD. She put on a lot of weight. I tried and tried to pull her out of this hike she had created for herself. I offered to take or pay for classes with her, tried to involve her with my social life, my wedding planning and the like, to no avail. Always an excuse. Suddenly, she was in contact with a guy from her past. They'd dated when I was 6, so this is about 20 years later. In 60 to 70 days, she dropped about 50 pounds, swimming 8 hours a day. She changed her looks, basically started taking care of herself, in preparation for meeting up with him in his home state. Which would have been great, but it struck me as wrong. She wasn't doing it for herself, it was for him. She was supposed to go for 15 days, but she kept delaying coming back. So much so that she missed my wedding. When she came back, she showed up at my place with a celebratory bottle of champagne. I refused to drink it with her, as the doctors told her 6 years ago, "You either keep drinking to avoid the seizures or go cold turkey." I am not an enabler. This started off as a conversation that led to me expressing my fears. She went atomic on me and left. Off to Florida, into the arms of this guy. She was with him for 2.5 months, then had a seizure, came home, and died. And I am so freaking mad at her. I can barely think about her without my throat closing up. The worst part is, after she died, everyone who cared tells me they could see it coming. Really? Really? Why didn't you say something? Maybe if you all had, she might have screamed, yelled, or even cut you out of her life, but at least she might be here. That and my brother and sister telling me they drank with her. In conclusion, I told my mum I was afraid of what might happen if and when her relationship didn't work out, and that relationship ended 3 months later, and my mum died 2 months after that. Fricking alcohol.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My wife's family has this ongoing drama with the oldest sibling, her sister who is 32 this year. The sister, who we'll call Sarah, decided to marry a 20-year-old smackhead, literally, 2 years ago. For some reason, she thought that marrying him would change him. Big surprise, it didn't. Myself, along with every other member of the family, tried to tell her that just because she married him, it didn't mean he'd stop cheating on her, abusing her, emptying her bank account, stealing her crap, and then disappearing for an entire week at the time. She didn't really listen. So what did she decide to do? She decided to get pregnant. Yeah, he got clean for a bit, a whole 6 months. I even started to think I might have been wrong about him. Nope. 6 months after his child was born, Sarah calls my wife up, sobbing that he'd been gone for days, and she didn't have any money in her checking account. Don't get me wrong, I care about Sarah and I love her as if she were my sister by blood, but I do think she's the dumbest person on the planet. So what did she decide to do? Get pregnant again. Oh yeah, this time the baby will really force him to change his ways. Fricking genius. Now, before anyone says that we should have done more to help her, you don't know the whole story. It's literally worse than any of the worst Lifetime channel stories about battered women. Let's just say I'm not the only member of the family to fly cross-country, we live in the Pacific Northwest and they live on the East Coast, to help her pack her crap up and drive her dumb butt back to this side of the continent, only to watch her drive her dumb butt back in a few months. Yes, this happened more than once. We've pretty much, as a family, told her not to call us the next time he cheats on her or leaves her and the kids for days or empties their bank account. When I stated that one chief on my submarine was not fit to stand chief of the watch, 1 month later there was a flood in the sub caused by said chief. A lot of these responses are quite brief and have very little in the way of follow-up. It kind of feels like a potentially disastrous and life-ending event like this needs to be expanded on. My brother bragged to me that he was making a lot of money for himself selling substances. I told him to stop, he'd get arrested and would get kicked out of his college. He didn't stop. My best friend was looking very, very sickly after his diagnosis. I tried to be optimistic when they were talking about treatment options, but my gut was telling me he wouldn't make it. It was right. Same thing happened with my grandma. They were optimistic after surgery, but I wasn't. I was right. I still feel like a jerk even though I don't believe my optimism would have made a difference. I have two. Here's the fun one. Boss, I really don't think this expensive third-party service is going to hold up. It's having database problems like crazy and their tech support is just not helpful at all. Whatever, we'll be fine.
12 seconds later.
Oh my god, the whole thing exploded and…
Yeah, I know, I built a backup server in my spare time just in case.
Employee of the Year.
And here's the unfun story. I suspected my ex was lying to me and underplaying her alcohol problem. After multiple, "Hey, sweetie, this bottle under your sink isn't really Poland Spring, is it?" followed by a massive fight, she had to become my ex. I know I got off easy in comparison to a lot of people who have family or significant others with drinking problems. This whole group of stories is full of them. When Princess Di died, my mother said, "You know, if Mother Teresa were to die tomorrow, no one would notice because of this insane media frenzy." A week later, Mother Teresa died. Hardly anyone noticed, the media was deluged with pictures of Princess Di's funeral. My roommates and I need to pay our rent with one check. Since one of my roommates usually can't come up with the money until the last minute, we don't have time to write each other checks and wait for them to clear. That means we usually give each other roughly $600 in cash. Last month I offered to meet my roommate at his bank with the cash, which I normally don't offer to do. He said no and that he'd just deposit it on his way to work the next day. Well, 3 days later, I get a frantic phone call from him saying that his man purse was stolen and he had never deposited the cash, which included mine and my roommate's and his own money. A total of $1,700 gone. That doesn't even include his previous 2 paychecks, which he had never deposited. Funny thing, the week prior to this, he was boasting about having a few grand in the bank, which is why he had waited so long to deposit the cash and his paychecks. Not anymore. I was dating a girl for a few months and everything was going good, to my knowledge. Then one day, she simply stopped talking to me. Last conversation consisted of, "I'm going to the movies with some friends tonight." "Alright, well, let's do something this weekend." "Okay, I love you." That was the last time I talked to her in over 9 months. She never answered a phone call, text message, or anything, and completely deleted me out of her life. There was no real breakup. 9 months later, I started thinking, oh crap, what if I got her pregnant and she bailed on me? So I got on Facebook to try and see if there were prego pictures or baby pictures. Nothing. Completely private profile. I friend request her. She actually accepts, to my surprise. I browse through the pictures and see nothing. She messages me and asks if we can get together. We meet up and I ask her what the heck happened. She said that she got pregnant, freaked out, and bailed on me. She then went to a clinic so she wouldn't have to have the baby. I still can't talk to her to this day. I have a 23-year-old acquaintance who hangs out with teenagers aged 16 to 19 most of the time. It's weird. Twice before, he's asked out girls shortly after their 18th birthdays. I came up with a theory that he becomes close friends with them when they're 16 to 17, hangs out with them a lot, gets to know them, and then they'll already be good friends by the time they're 18 and they'll want to go out with him. He just asked out a friend of mine the day she turned 18. She said no. I'm so proud of her. Thought my ex was cheating on me. A couple of days later, I found out that she slept with 5 different guys in one night and had been sleeping with other guys consistently. I met up with some friends to go to a concert and my best bud wasn't there yet. He wouldn't answer his phone at all and I was getting really teed off, and I ended up having to give his ticket away. Throughout the night a couple of times, I was jokingly saying, he's either dead or in jail. He got into a bad accident on the way from work and died that afternoon. I was worried that the Star Wars prequels wouldn't live up to the original trilogy.
I was worried that the Star Wars prequels wouldn't live up to the prequel trilogy. I saw the prequels first. I was severely disappointed in the CG and lack of double-sided lightsabers in the original.
Well, we've done it, folks. We've reached the inevitable cesspit of Star Wars finger-pointing that you find if you look anywhere on the internet for long enough. Oh, I really shouldn't take another shot.
5 seconds later.
I outed my dad at Thanksgiving several years ago. He denied it, but a few years later, after spending too much time with one of his friends, my mum kicked him out of the house. They divorced shortly thereafter. As a child, I was standing next to the neighbor's trampoline, examining the springs. Tugging on one, I said, "This one's loose." I distinctly remember that my hand was back at my side when it popped loose, ricocheted off my face, and flew over the neighbor's one-story house. When I was 18, my father was showing all of the symptoms of someone with untreated diabetes. Tingling feet, lack of energy, constantly thirsty, and several trips to the bathroom a day. He went to his doctor, and the doctor said he was perfectly fine, even though I pointed out to the doctor all of these obvious signs. I had an argument with the doctor, and he sent us home. A week later, my father went into diabetic shock and nearly died. The worst part was that when the doctor came to the ER to speak to the ICU attending, he told them there were no previous signs of diabetes, at which point we got into a huge argument. My mum called me while I was in class and left a voicemail on my cell phone. She had called from her cell phone and I knew as soon as I saw her name pop up that something awful had happened, because she hated that phone and never used it if she could avoid it. The message was that my dad had just died from a heart attack. I told my brother his girlfriend was going to hurt him if he stayed with her. 3 months later, he came home from AITA to find her sucking some eggplant in his car outside their shared apartment. That particular eggplant belonged to her stepbrother. I didn't think a girl liked me, so I asked her out. I was right.
Well, at least you got an answer. To me, not knowing is worse than rejection.
My friend was drunk and got into a fight with her boyfriend at her birthday party. I told her she was too drunk to drive and we argued about it for a while, but she had gotten a brand new BMW 6 Series for her birthday and wasn't going to leave it parked there or let someone else drive it. Shortly after that argument, no one could find her and everyone was leaving the party. It took forever to get home because half a mile away, the road was blocked due to an upside-down BMW 6 Series in the middle of the road. She was fine, by the way. Coming up on a year since my best friend took her own life. I knew she knew where her dad's hunting weapons were because she told me. Several months passed. We'd talk every day on the phone and she would be singing to my son. One night she calls me and I answer the phone. We talk about boys and the usual stuff. After I asked if she wanted to talk to my son, she said yes and I handed him the phone. He was 6 months old. She sang to him one last time. We said our goodbyes and I love yous. The next morning, I was calling her to talk about something, but I couldn't reach her. I called a couple of times throughout the day, but this is normal for her. She wouldn't talk on the phone. A couple of days pass and she's not answering her phone. I didn't really think much of it because it was usual. Her boyfriend wrote to me on Facebook to call him, and I already knew. I knew that I'd lost my best friend, and I knew that she was gone. Right after she got off the phone with me, she had taken her own life. She was bipolar, but everything seemed to be working lately. I hate to say it, but I knew she was going to take care of herself, but not when she was going to do it. My son still listens to her sing to him because of a video of herself singing left up on YouTube. I still get to see her smiling face and hear her beautiful voice. My parents explained that they were going to use morphine to help my grandfather. I realized as we all stood sobbing around his bed that what it really was that he was so sick we were letting him pass the easiest way. The morphine slowed down his breathing and heart rate until he died. Did we kill him if he was dying anyways? No, this is how most people die in the end. As you get older and see more family members die, this is the way it happens most often. We now have advances in medical science that can keep our bodies technically alive for far longer than is really helpful. And if you actually took them off life support, it could cause pain. But mostly, they do this with morphine, so it's as peaceful as possible for the family. What levels of cheapness have astonished you? When I was a little kid, I used to spend summers at my grandparents' house, and one of my chores was to set the table before dinner every night. Whenever we were having company over for dinner, I was instructed to use the good napkins. That meant the napkins that didn't have restaurant logos printed on them. We only went to restaurants when my grandmother felt she could come out ahead of the deal, and there were many ways to accomplish this. She clipped coupons, of course, but that was kids' stuff. Anytime she did anything for someone, she'd get them to take her to dinner to return the favor. She had an enormous purse which generally came back stuffed with napkins and food from the buffet. She didn't see much point in going to any restaurant that didn't at least have a salad bar. One year, when my mother and I offered to take her to dinner for her birthday, we ended up having to drive over an hour to get to a sizzler she hadn't been banned from. At my local Dunkin' Donuts, you have to ask the workers specifically if you want a packet of sugar or sweet and low, or one of those little half-and-half containers, because the senior citizens in the area used to come in and take them all so that they wouldn't have to buy them in the store, and the workers had to take them all away. My 13-year-old daughter was invited to a small birthday party at a mediocre chain restaurant, Ruby Tuesdays, for her best friend. The girlfriend is here quite often and regularly eats dinner, breakfast, lunch, etc. if she's here, and sleeps over about twice a week during the summertime. She's been included to trips at the amusement park and water parks nearby. We have season tickets, but there's always something to eat like funnel cakes. She comes to movies with us and the occasional trip to Dairy Queen, and I've never asked to be paid or have her pay her own way. We treat her as one of her own. Imagine my disgust when my daughter calls me from the restaurant bathroom, nearly in tears, telling me they've just told her that she'll have to pick up her own check, after dinner and dessert have been served. The check was $13. The father actually said separate checks to the waitress, but my daughter didn't know what that meant. She had a few bucks on her, but she was short about $5. The other girl's father told my daughter that she would have to stay and wash dishes or something, and got real ugly with her, like she'd misled them or something. I have the parents' cell phone numbers, and I called him and asked him real nice-like if he could spot her $10 until he brought her home, and I'd pay him back. He refused and made it like somehow my daughter and I was scamming him. He suggested that I call the front desk and square it away because they were leaving and were going to leave my daughter there if she couldn't pay, so he wouldn't have the cops chasing him down on his daughter's birthday. I did call the front desk and gave them my credit card, included a healthy tip, and told my daughter I'd be there to pick her up in 10 minutes. Don't go anywhere. When I got there, this complete jerk was trying to get my daughter to leave with his family now that the bill was paid. His daughter was in tears. Needless to say, it got ugly. Good God, I've been all over the socio-economic ladder of society and interacted with people on all of the rungs, and never once have I had a first-hand view to something like this. Don't be like this, people. My aunt and uncle were visiting with their 2 kids. My uncle asked me if I wanted to go to a Friendly's for ice cream. He bought himself and his 2 kids ice cream and then asked if I had money for myself. I was 9, so no, I didn't have money. He said, "Too bad," and started back towards his car. I realized he just needed me for direction. He's a frickin' butthead. My mum had a boyfriend that would pull the stems off cherries before purchasing them from the grocery store because he felt they'd weigh less without the stems and he'd get more for the money. My friend, who used to work at the supermarket, once told me about a customer who used to peel bananas before he bought them for the same reason. I mean, that's definitely unsanitary. A group of friends went out for dinner at a convention and several people had leftovers. When we returned, one of the people who had not been able to get dinner was bummed. So one of the diners said, "Well, I have some leftovers if you'd like them." "Oh, sure, thanks." "Okay, my meal was $10 and there's about half left. So you owe me…" No, I'm not kidding. And no, it wasn't me either. In the department where I work, I always have a small basket of candy, Jolly Ranchers, Tootsie Rolls, Lifesavers, out for my customers. Most are appreciative and ask, "Are these free?" and take one, maybe two, and thank me for the candy. Then there are some customers who just walk up and take handfuls of the candy. Once I had an older man dump the entire thing into his man purse, look straight at me, and walk out. When I was getting a flu shot once, I watched a really old guy in a wheelchair pocket like 20 hard candies, while the nurse set up his next appointment. It made my day, but it wasn't my candy, and he was super old. Speaking of hard candy, I had squirrels break into my college apartment over winter break in my senior year when I happened to have 21 pounds of hard candy that I got for my 21st birthday. Well, these squirrels went crazy on it and I came back to find candy wrappers everywhere, but concentrated most heavily on my couch. I guess they were relaxing on my couch while destroying my candy supply. We found candy all over our apartment until the day we moved out. I found one piece under our toilet brush. How? It's not just people that steal candy, apparently. I knew a farmer who only had one light bulb. He would carry it around with him all the time, taking it from one room to another if he needed to. The company I work for won't buy us pens. Start using crayons. I don't have any crayons lying around at work, but I have filled out a record sheet in nothing but pink highlighter. Last night, this happened at a fair. The man at the front of the line for ice cream offered to pay for all the kids in the family behind him because he was taking a while to order. He gave the booth $40 and said whatever was left over should go to the charity. The church was running the ice cream booth. The people with the kids' ice cream totaled $21 and they insisted for the change back. It wasn't even their money. When the lady refused, Mum asked for the manager. What the frick? She didn't get the money, but she walked away teed off. To top it all off, the guy in front of her had already taken a while, hence his generosity, and then her bickering took even longer until they were moved off to the side, so a huge line behind her was teed off as well. She was a witch on multiple levels. Witchception. I work in a subway and an evil woman came in one day. It was busy and she took forever to order, asking a million questions and complaining about everything while an entire line is behind her. She gets to pay, but, "Oh, I don't have enough money for that." The nice old man behind her offers to pay for food sincerely, and she thanks him. She goes to sit down and then gets up and complains to us while there's a busy line because she wants us to turn the ceiling fans off. They've never been off in the 3 years I worked there. To finally kick it off, she gets back up before leaving, orders 2 more footlongs and pays for it with no problem with the same wallet she said had no money in it. We were all shocked at this evil woman. See, our McDonald's is awesome. We had a similar situation where someone was slightly short on their meal. It was like £21.80, and they apparently only had 20 quid. So the cashier was really nice and let them have it anyway. So the person behind gave the cashier the missing £1.80. Later, the same guy comes up to try and order a McFlurry. Midway through the order, the person who served them last walks over to the till and presses cancel. "I'm sorry, sir, we don't do free meals." He looks over and asks what he's talking about. "Well, you said you only had 20, remember? And you spent that." He looked like he was about to explode. It was brilliant. You can't con our McDonald's. I work at a hardware store. Someone came in needing parts for gas line repair. Once I got him set up with all the pipes and fittings, I asked if he had the right tape for it. You need a special type of Teflon tape to have the perfect seal and prevent gas leaks. He replied, "No, can you get me some?" I grabbed the tape and he asks why I grabbed the yellow tape, $4.99, instead of the blue tape, 99 cents. I told him that blue is for the water line and using it could very likely cause a gas leak. After trying to convince him for 10 minutes to just spend the $4 extra on something that would likely save his life, I walked away. I came back from my break, and it turns out the guy put back all of the black iron, gas pipes and fittings that I'd chosen for him, and got the galvanized steel, water pipes and fittings instead, for a total of $15 cheaper, as well as the blue tape. 2 weeks later, there was a story on the news about a guy whose house had a gas leak and exploded. Luckily, the man was out with his family at the time and no one was injured. I'm not sure if it was the same man from the store, but I think it's likely. In conclusion, a guy came into the hardware store for gas line repairs, ended up using pipes and fittings for water line instead of gas to save about $15 on a $250 purchase. Possibly caused his house to explode. I mean, if it was the same guy, I think you have a lifetime license to be smug, right? Imagine going out of your way to save $15 and blowing up your house. And there's a reasonable chance he was too much of a cheapskate for insurance. I have a cousin who invited their friend over to their side of the family's house for Christmas dinner. She then charged her invited friend $5 for their meal. Who does that? I work at a casino and I'm constantly amazed at how many people raid ashtrays for the last bits of tobacco and cigarette butts. And I work in a bar where people will walk in and start drinking out of beers left out on the tables of regulars that go out for smokes and stuff until we catch them and throw them out. My best friend in like 1st or 2nd grade invited me to spend the night at his house. When it was time to brush our teeth, I realized that I'd forgotten my toothbrush. He told his mum about it and I thought I was in luck when his mum brought us a brand new toothbrush, but she opened it, handed it to him, and told him to give me his old one. I was skeptical, but I used it. I have a friend who is full-on gluten intolerant. However, he's so cheap he'll go to any lengths to avoid paying for food, or anything else. When he found out he could dumpster dive unlimited bread in San Francisco, that became the staple, nay, the entirety of his diet. He spends his days moaning in agony as his insides churn and roil, suffering from constant fiery diarrhea. Yet he continues to eat his glutinous meals merely because they're free.
So I guess you could say he's on a gluten-free diet then, eh?
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Oh, I have a great one. My dad was scheduled to get a hip replacement, and the day before the operation, I came home to find him mowing the lawn with a push mower. He was grimacing in pain and his face was red. When I asked him why the heck he was mowing, he replied, "I'm getting a new hip, so I wanted to wear the old one out and save the new one a mow." I lived with 3 other people during my junior year of college, and one of them insisted on keeping the AC off in the summer and the heat off in the winter, even though we lived in campus housing and didn't pay for any utilities, just so that she could prepare herself for the following year when she would be living in her own apartment and never using it to save money. I got fed up, found the manual for the thermostat online, and set it to never be allowed to go above a certain temperature in the summer and never go below a certain temperature in the winter.
Hey, I'm gonna make everyone suffer so that I'm used to suffering next year. Sounds like a really selfish person.
When my grandmother was alive, she would come and visit once or twice a year. This despite her having all sorts of medical complications like osteoporosis and kidney dialysis. She really loved her son. Anyway, when she arrived, she had a bag of frozen Olive Garden breadsticks with her for us kids. At that time in my life, I went, "Ew, gross." But now that she's passed, I asked my dad why she kept doing that. The answer was, "When she took you to Olive Garden once, you said to her that you really liked those breadsticks." I was shocked. Turns out Grandma wasn't so much cheap as old, weird, and crazy in love with her grandkids. My grandma did something like this. I went to her house one time and she presented me with a giant jar of pennies. I was really confused. Turns out that 5 or 6 years earlier, when I was quite young, I told her I collected pennies. She kept every single penny she got since. At IKEA, coffee is bottomless. Now a cup is free with the IKEA family card. But before that, it was like $2. My girlfriend's friend and her family would go in and buy 1 cup, and it would be passed along to each member to get their turn. They would apparently be there for hours socializing over a single cup of coffee.
This is actually a really clever way to pass on immunity to disease. Well, except for herpes. The herpes will always get ya.
My grandparents lived through the Depression. They waste nothing. Their freezer is a menagerie of ancient treasures. Last year we ate Thanksgiving at their house. My mum did all the cooking, but my grandma contributed a couple of desserts. One was a marshmallowy jello sort of thing with pistachios. When we got done eating, she proudly declared that it had been sitting in the freezer since 1996. She was afraid we'd find out and would waste it by not eating it. Weird thing is, it was still tasty as heck. Long story short, our grandmother fed us a 15-year-old pudding. I thought it was hilarious at the time, but it's kind of surprising we didn't get sick. My dad was actually annoyed that I found it odd at all. To give you an idea of what being raised in that house was like. This was when my grandparents were moving out of their house into a retirement home too, so they were being forced to use up what they'd saved for a long time. I think that probably played a part. They're both still alive today, Grandma's 92 and Grandpa's 94, so they must be doing something right. A lady I used to know was thrown out of a buffet for filling her purse with food. She was actually offended and called the manager. I went to a birthday dinner for my mother-in-law at a Filipino restaurant. Along with my wife and I, 4 of her friends were there. The friends ordered a mountain of food for the table. There were 7 of us there, but if there were a dozen, we couldn't have finished it all. This was a bit irritating right off the bat because while I was happy to pitch in for her birthday dinner, I didn't want to pay 20% of the gosh darn feast from Westeros that they'd ordered. It would end up being over $200 worth of food. So then the check comes and I pitch in my credit card, and 3 out of the 4 friends turn into statues, except the oldest gentleman, who offers something like $15. I grab the bill and divide it by 5, leaving out the dishes and drinks that my wife and I ordered for ourselves, and tally it up saying what everyone owes. Crickets. I remind everyone that they were the ones who ordered this giant mountain of food in the first place, half of which is going to go to waste. To prevent awkwardness, my mother-in-law grabs the bill and runs off, leaving my credit card to go and pay it. My wife prevents me from stopping her and causing a scene. I quietly lay into the 3 deadbeats at the table for letting an elderly woman on a fixed income pay $200 plus bill for her own birthday dinner. I lose it and call them fricking moochers. And whoa, suddenly there's that scene that everyone was working so hard to prevent, with them screaming at me and me screaming back. The restaurant owners understandably intervened and tossed us all out. I go back in and apologize and explain what happened. The restaurant, to their credit, knock 40% off the bill out of nothing more than kindness. Salo Grill in Las Vegas get amongst it, and they cancel the charge on my mother-in-law's card, and I pick up the rest, which was still quite a bit, but I felt a lot better about it. Again, maybe these other people had particular economic difficulties, but I can't imagine ever doing this to someone. What a bunch of cheapskates. My aunt and uncle once brought me out to eat with my cousins. We went to McDonald's and ordered 1 hamburger from the dollar menu and split it 3 ways with my cousins.
That would make me more hungry than I started out.
You were supposed to fight your cousins to the death for the right to consume the entire hamburger. My dad is a physics professor at a university, which if you know of this breed of humans, none of this might surprise you. He, and I'll swear to all that's sacred, goes to the cafeteria on campus and makes a meal out of the free condiments. Mexican-style chip salsa, chopped onion packets, crackers, etc. Then he'll call me to brag about it. Another one he does, he found a store that sells expired food for a ridiculously low price. He said he spent $20 and now has microwavable popcorn for life. My dad never buys new tires, he buys used ones that the shop keeps when people replace them. He gets the tires for super cheap after negotiating them for like $15 to $20. The best part is that he avoids driving to not waste gas so much that the tires never actually wear out, they just rot. When he feels like splurging, he'll buy a pork shoulder, which is a lot of meat for $7 to $10. He cuts off all the meat and grinds it along with free condiments from a cafeteria into a cylinder shape that he wraps with shopping bags from a store. Then he freezes it. When he wants some, he slices some pieces off like patties and sautés them, in its own oil, of course. This will last him months. One time he called me while I was cooking. He asked me what I was making and I said that I was cooking spaghetti. He said that spaghettis are about 3 times the price per mass as rice and throwing away my money. He doesn't use toilet paper, just water, which I suppose is actually cleaner anyway.
Actually, using water to wash your post-crappy butt is a very common method throughout the world, especially in poorer countries where the people don't have enough to obtain or rather spend resources on other things than toilet paper. I'm sure there are many methods. The one I have used when overseas is follows. You crap while hovering and keep the butt cheeks apart. This reduces the crap-to-skin contact. Also, hemorrhoids. Then you get a little bucket or a large cup and use it to run water down your butt crack while bent forward. If you can, lather up your hands with soap and use your fingers. Rinse, and then wash your hands. My daily routine is set so that I shower after my morning craps anyway, and it works out fine. This method avoids the use of paper, and your butt is cleaner than with toilet paper. It has been pointed out to me that crap can get stuck under your nails, but you keep your fingernails short and clean when using this method. I had a bunch of cheap Bic pens when I worked as a server at Applebee's. I left one with the table so they could sign the receipt. I watched the dad sign it, get up, start walking away with his family, then turn around 6 feet later, go back to the table and pocket my pen.
My 10th birthday present from my grandmother was a single expired McDonald's coupon. Are they the Dursleys?
My best friend in middle school wanted to go to Outback Steakhouse for his birthday, so his parents and 4 friends loaded up and drove the 45 minutes. We all ordered our food, and an order was placed for an appetizer of cheese fries that we would all share. The birthday boy goes first and gets a huge freaking portion, literally 2/3 of the cheese fries, and makes sure to take all the cheese with it. All that was left were the bare remnants. No big deal. I'm cool, it's free food anyway. When the time to pay comes, the dad asks me and the other kids for $20 each. I ask why, and he says, well, for your portion of the appetizer, your food, your drink, and for the birthday boy's food as well. I flat out refuse, and he threatens that maybe you should call your mum to drive 45 minutes to pick you up. I was 14 at the time. I can't even imagine myself accepting money from a child, never mind straight up forcing them to pay for their meal plus part of someone else's. That's ridiculous. I mean, this way, the parents aren't even paying for their own child's birthday meal. Classy. Work dinner party. There are about 25 of us coming. Potluck. The co-worker says, I'll bring the wine. She brings 4 open bottles, each between 1/3 and 2/3 full. My stepdad keeps all the toilet paper in his room. We have 2 bathrooms, and every time the toilet paper runs out in my bathroom, I have to ask for a new roll, which then goes on to 20 minutes of getting yelled at that I'm wasting paper. I feel like I have to apologize for pooping. Even if I try to use the other bathroom, I get yelled at for using their bathroom when I have my own. I had a friend in college who never spent more than $10 a week on food, because she knew when and where all the events with free food were on campus. I aspire to have that level of commitment. I mean, I call that frugal, not cheap. You're paying a buttload for tuition and other expenses. Part of these free meals comes from tuition money, so it's not really free, it's more like prepaid. In college, that's not just cheap, that's smart. What is something that you're never fricking buying again? Glass furniture. I had a glass desk from IKEA for about 2 years, and one morning while I was sleeping, it spontaneously exploded. There was no one piece of it left that was larger than my thumbnail, and it took days to clean up. Apparently that can happen with tempered glass. Tension builds up due to temperature changes, and it just shatters. We had a low-grade earthquake where I live. The glass table shattered 3 days later. Fricking home warranty. I bought a house that had just hit 10 years and got all of the original appliances. Oh, the appliances are covered, they said, but only if you buy a home warranty. Sure, it only lasts a year, but these things might break in that year. It's only $500, better safe than sorry. Turns out crap does break. The water heater had a problem, the fridge had a problem, none of it caught by inspection. I go to the warranty people and it's $75 for someone to evaluate it. Cool, I think. Cheaper than buying new stuff. Then everything gets denied. The most random F reasons are given to me. I argue, I'm told that that's what the inspectors said. I get the transcripts and guess what? All of their inspectors said that this should be covered. The warranty company lied to me. I threw the lies in their face and I get back, well, it doesn't matter, it still isn't covered. One of the dudes, a plumber I later had come back to help, said these companies never cover anything. Their reason on the water heater? Rust on the unit. He told them the rust didn't cause the problem and was normal. To them, any potential problem is reason for denial. Got a dent in a unit? Denied. Got a scratch? Denied. Here's the real crap part of it though. This was all in my first 30 days living there. Like any reasonable person, I thought I could just call up and cancel and get some, or maybe any, of my money back. You know what the woman told me on the phone? It's not legal to return a home warranty in the first year. We're not talking PMI or fire insurance or disaster crap or whatever. This was just a warranty on things like appliances, and can apply to things like structure. I told the woman she worked for crooks and hung up. So if you're buying a house and they want $500 to $600 to insure your home for a year, do what my plumber said. Save your money and do the repairs yourself. I'm still mad about it and it's been like 3 years. Frick. Cheese, in massive quotation marks, from the dollar store. Oh god, what would that even be made out of? Low-density plastic? I wish I could contact the person who wrote this 8 years ago. A General Electric's made exclusively for Walmart $50 vacuum. I bought a used Kirby from eBay and we threw the GE over the balcony and killed it Office Space style. Bacon-flavored popcorn. It basically made my entire house smell like sweaty butt. I'm not kidding, it lingered for days. It tasted dreadful too.
Allow me to give you my recipe for the tastiest popcorn ever. Trademarked. Microwaved bacon popcorn is gross and inedible. Instead, make some bacon and save the grease. The next time you want delicious popcorn, put 3 to 4 tablespoons of bacon grease in the bottom of a large cooking pot. Apply medium-high heat. When the grease is all melted, add about half a cup of popcorn kernels, enough to mostly cover the bottom of the pan, and put the lid on. Shake somewhat vigorously until the popcorn is no longer popping quickly. Immediately pour delicious popcorn into another container, as it will scorch very quickly if you don't. Depending on the saltiness of your bacon, you may want to add salt, but probably not. Enjoy! I'll keep this short and sweet. I was very thirsty one night shift and thought it would be a good idea to buy 1 liter of sugar-free aloe water. After guzzling the entire thing, I felt quite refreshed. I downed a pita bread and my lunch was complete. Fast forward an hour later and I started to feel a rumbling in my stomach and the urge to pass gas. I decided to hold my toot in at the time and visit the closest washroom. At that very moment, I emptied my entire stomach contents and more into the toilet in the most violent butt explosion of my life. For the remaining 4 hours of my shift, everything coming out of my butt was liquid. I learned that particular aloe water was a very close cousin of the sugar-free gummy bears. 10 out of 10 will not buy sugar-free aloe water again. Food from that shady-as-frick Chinese food cart next to my building. Something I've said 4 or 5 times already. Oh. Mate, the rule with takeaway food is the dodgier the joint looks, the better the food. Hell, my local Indian joint has perpetual low-lying smoke from all the curries, and the Chinese joint has burnt down 3 times. Both of them do super good takeaway food. That only applies to ethnic food though. Your local chippy shop needs to be squeaky clean. Sea monkeys. They're not tiny humanoids, and their construction skills leave much to be desired. Tyrannizing them is not very rewarding. All they did in response to my oppressive taxation and restrictive curfews was die and turn the water brown. A bicycle from Walmart. Cheap bikes are really expensive to fix. What's the cheapest bike that's worth it, I wonder? A used bike that was expensive when it was new. Good bikes last fricking forever, if you take care of them. My bike was built 30 years ago and it's 10 times better than the piece of crap I used to ride. A brand new $300 folding bike. If you buy a folding bike, you should just assume that it's equal quality to a non-folder that costs half of that. So you probably got the quality of a $150 bike. I honestly wouldn't trust a folder that costs less than $600. Actually, I wouldn't trust a folder that wasn't made by a major company. An inkjet printer. I've probably bought more than a dozen of them over the years, and while they produce outstanding color out of the box, unless you're printing full-on color on a regular basis, like every day, then you're going to get clogs and failures. And don't even get me started on the whole, you're out of yellow ink, so you can't scan anything now, with the all-in-ones. About 2 years ago, I bought a Brother MFC 9340 CDW laser printer for my mother, and a few months later I bought the same printer for myself. No more clogged ink, duplex printing that doesn't even saturate the paper, consistent print quality, wider variety of paper to choose from, and overall cheaper than an inkjet. I'm never going back. That bloody loot crate crap. I only brought it once when I thought the stuff was alright, but it really teased me off now watching YouTubers continually opening crates and then acting like they're so glad that they got a fricking fridge magnet. My How to Learn Buddha's Palm booklet. Clothes from Groupon. Almost anything from Groupon. My last few experiences have been pretty bad. When Groupon was new, you could get some great deals, but now it's spa, crap Chinese products, crappy restaurants, rinse and repeat. Yeah, it might have been a legit enterprise once, but I think by now most business owners have realized that the sorts of people who use coupon deals rarely become repeat customers. They'll come in holding that voucher in front of them like a shield against having to pay full price, grab as many extras as they can, steal your pens and leave never to return. Signed, bitter former restaurant manager who never got tipped by coupon users. We had a buddy named Dave who once brought over some Klondike bars for a game night and left the remainders in the fridge. When he came back a week later, he was horrified and livid that his Klondike bars, which were left in the fridge of 3 bachelors, had been eaten without his permission. He made such a stink about it that us 3 guys living there, as a prank, filled the freezer to the brim with Klondike bars. We ate and ate them, but the stock never depleted.
Some moron would keep the joke going by buying enough Klondike bars to fill it back to full. And when you're young and a cheapskate, you'll eat a Klondike bar before going to find real food. Don't get me wrong, ice cream and chocolate are great, but man, I could go my whole life without eating another Klondike bar, and that was already 15 years ago. Frickin' Dave, man. A frickin' sleep number mattress. Piece of crap is like sleeping on an air mattress, and after a little while the sides lose their integrity, so the only comfortable spot becomes broken down. Forked out a lot of cash for that stupid mattress. The only one who seemed to like it was the cat. Anything from Finish Line. A couple of years ago, I needed a new pair of shoes. Luckily, I had a Finish Line gift card. I'd never shopped there before, but I'd save money with the gift card, so I walk in and buy a pair of shoes. The cashier asks if I'd like coupons sent to me in the mail. I figure, sure, why not? So I wrote down my address and everything. Got my shoes, everything's cool. Fast forward to 7 months later, I have a $60 charge on my bank account from Sports Illust. Something like that, it resembled Sports Illustrated. So, being confused, I call Sports Illustrated and tell them I was being charged for subscribing, even though I could give less of a crap about sports. The man basically tells me, sorry about that, I don't know how that could happen. The charges should be reversed within 3 days. I figured, alright, this crap's finally over. Fast forward 2 weeks later and I realize that the charge has not been reversed whatsoever. I decide that I'm going to call back again after work and talk to them about it yet again. So after work, I check my bank account one last time to see if it was reversed. Not only was it not reversed, but I had another charge that said something like Sports Illustrated Kids, for another $60. So basically, after he told me the charges would be reversed after 3 days, they weren't after 2 weeks, and then they had the big brass ones to charge me yet again. This time I was teed off and called immediately. The tone in the lady's voice seemed like she'd been dealing with this all day or something. She sighed and said, "Have you purchased anything from Finish Line recently?" And I had to think about it, and then it hit me that I did about 7 months ago. And I said, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "Because this has been a real problem with everyone who purchased from Finish Line. I'll have the charges reversed this time, I really will." And after the phone call, I called the bank to tell them about the whole thing. Everything was refunded back to me in the end, but after dealing with that crap, I'm never buying from Finish Line again. Who the frick do you think you are just subscribing everyone to Sports Illustrated unwillingly? I don't even give a crap about sports. I just wanted to buy a simple pair of shoes and that's it. In conclusion, Finish Line signed me up for Sports Illustrated without my permission. I just wanted to buy a pair of shoes. Tried reversing the charges, but instead they subscribed me twice. I had to call the bank to actually fix it. Don't shop at Finish Line.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Those pink, frosted animal crackers. Good as all heck, but I ate way too many when I was younger, and I still get sick even to this day when I think about it. I feel like everyone has that one food that they ruined for themselves as a child. For me, it was a Mexican candy called Lucas. I ate it once when I was extremely sick, and I haven't been able to stomach it since. Which is sad because I remember loving it for a couple of hours. At least until I threw it all up. I will never go with my current ISP fricking ever again if I have the option. The amount of bullcrap I've had to deal with is just insane. First, they brought our previous ISP. I called to cancel the phone line we got for free, along with a free router. The new ISP tried to charge for it, but they say they'll of course remove it. I got a confirmation letter. Get another one. In the end, I got one letter every day for over 3 weeks confirming the exact same thing. Still shows up on my bill. Got charged for TV. It's included in my rent. I call them and they said, sure, we'll of course remove it. It shows up on my next bill. I call again and they claim that the bill was printed before my call. Just pay less than what it says on the bill. Next month, it's still there. They claim the exact same thing, printed before I called. I called the rep on his bullcrap, and all he does is cough and ask if there's anything else I need help with. I mildly lose my crap at this point, but I finally get rid of the extra charge on the next bill. This was all in the span of 3 months. Never again if I have the option. The previous ISP worked flawlessly for over a year. What infuriates me the most is that this is most likely their modus operandi, counting on people not reading too closely what they're getting charged for. Granted, they're reasonably priced at 100 megabits a second for an equivalent of $24 a month,
but based on their customer service and general inability to do even the simplest of tasks without several weeks of issues, I'll go with another one next time. What? It's not like an ISP to make every little transaction a nightmare. They instantly and immediately fix your options and give you your money right away, like travel insurance and substance-using roommates who owe you rent. A frozen gluten-free pizza. £3 for a large nacho with a pinch of cheese on it. What a load of crap. Third-party extended warranty. I bought our first family car a few months after getting married. A 5-year-old Dodge Magnum with 50k on the odometer. They kinda just threw the warranty in and I didn't realize it until I was signing papers and I got to the extended warranty page. Asked what the frick this was and the salesman ended up getting me to pay for it. It's only $1,200, pretty cheap peace of mind, right? Right. I'm a family man now. I hate to have any pesky repairs get in my way. I never used it, needed tie rods on one time, but they were considered a wear item, so it was out of my own pocket. Instead of the extended warranty, do your research, buy cars that don't have overcomplicated parts that break down or require expensive services. I don't buy anything with a timing belt anymore, only chains. Do your maintenance the way your manual says and consider using the severe schedule. Join a forum for your particular car. If the thingamajig shakes when you turn the doohickey, you can bet someone else's thingamajig had shaken before, so look it up. Most of all, this is what you keep an emergency fund for. If you're maintaining your vehicle properly, things shouldn't break, but if they do, have some money tucked away for emergency repairs. Any Steam game before it goes on sale. A cheap vacuum. I have 2 dogs and vacuumed with it the day before I brought a new one. Vacuumed with the new one, Shark Rotator Professional for those wondering, and literally filled 2 trash bags with missed pet hair, having just vacuumed the day before. Rubbers. I'm married and had a vasectomy. I was in the same boat with 2 kids already. Evidently, the US military gives crappy vasectomies. After the 3rd kid, my wife got fixed. Third-party controllers. They only ever last all of a week or 2 before something goes wrong. As fun as they are, those cheap remote control helicopters are probably the most frustrating things to try and control. I think I've owned 3 and they've all broken within 1 week of buying. Beats by Dr. Dre. Why didn't I listen to what everyone told me? Ben & Jerry's changed the Heath bars that they use to some tasteless, disgusting hippie crap about a year ago. I get that they're all about conservation and all, but they screwed up my absolute favorite go-to ice cream of all time. I was in Vermont when they invented Heath Bar Crunch about 25 or 30 years ago, and they were giving it out as samples. I fell in love right then and there, but they've wronged me and cut me deep. Never again, unless I hear they go back to the old Heath bars. Off-brand saran wrap or cling film. It tears if you look at it wrong and won't stick to itself on wraparound. Bullcrap in a box. Wooden tiki torches. They get messed up after 1 season outside in the elements, and half of them come crooked and crack when you put them in the ground. I invested in some nice metal and glass ones. 1-ply toilet paper. I bought a big package on accident once and I'll never do that again. My finger popped through that wispy garbage the first time I used it, and I eventually was using ridiculously thick wads of paper to keep myself safe. Toilet paper is one of those products where it's always best to pay more for the good stuff. An engagement ring. The Dyson ball vacuum. Man, is that thing named wrong. I couldn't walk for 3 days after using it. I was about to say, mine works great and is so easy to push, and then I caught on. Girly crap. Give me man razors, man deodorant, man shower gel, man everything. Half the price and lasts way longer than crappy girl products. Okay, apparently I'm worse than Margaret Thatcher because I said this. Relax. If you want to use girly products, go ahead. If you want to use men's products, go ahead. I personally find men's antiperspirant, Rexona, to be my choice of deodorant because I'm very active and work outside. Every brand of men's razors have lasted longer than my women's ones. My men's work boots last amazingly better and are sturdier than any woman's work boots I've had in the past. That's my personal experience anyway. Hulu subscription. I can't stand paying for a service and still having to watch through commercials. What? Look, I was never going to buy that service anyway because it just seemed so inherently crap, but that is some complete garbage compared to the other services on offer. Not sure if it's changed in the years since that comment was written, though. Size 46 and above pants.
Not a product quality thing, just a quality of life thing.
Cigarettes. Full year clean, let's go.
A DVD rewinder. Fricking useless. I remember when Blockbuster was first introducing DVDs, and my dad got a notice that he failed to rewind his disc before returning it to the store. "Some people are just dumb," he said, "but don't threaten me with a fine because of your own stupidity." Any Ubisoft product available for pre-purchase.
Dude, any video game for pre-order. It's been a terrible stretch.
A Lenovo laptop from India. I brought a Y500 from them, and it was the worst experience ever. I know most people think the company is excellent, but their after-sales service is simply awful. 2 days after delivery, I found that the touchpad wouldn't work properly. After repeatedly emailing them, asking for repair centers, a repair tech, or any number of things, I was told that I had applied for a replacement too late, since I'd bypassed the 1-week replacement limit. I asked them again about repairing the laptop, and they sent over a technician who knew less than I did about laptops. He left the house having spoiled the screen by scratching it with a screwdriver and twisting the fan blade so that the laptop wouldn't start anymore. With infinite patience, I called the repair center, and I asked for a repair tech to fix the things the previous guy had done wrong. They made excuses for days and days, doing absolutely nothing. If you think Comcast is bad, this was far worse. I was misquoted saying, "The issue has been fixed," and they closed the case number, telling me I'd have to go through the entire process again. I was given a Lenovo official help center number. That's when I learned the guys I was speaking to was simply a small repair shop that Lenovo had contracted all their Bombay customers to. After waiting on the Lenovo helpline for 15 minutes, listening to crappy elevator music, I was told that the help center was inactive and that I should call up another number. The very same fricking number that belonged to the repair shop. I fricking lost it. The worst part is, in India, it's not possible to sue a company and expect a speedy resolution. All this was happening a few weeks before my exams, and I had a comp sci project due for submission. In the end, I had to give up this new, almost never used laptop to a repair shop that I actually trusted. Their service was far better than anything Lenovo had ever offered me so far, even if it was paid. I ended up using my old HP DV6000 for my exams. I managed to submit the project on time, but seriously, F Lenovo. In conclusion, frick Lenovo for getting me stuck in a feedback loop. A laptop without fans so strong that they can at least ensure that the darn thing doesn't overheat after an hour, unless I purchase another gosh darn ventilation pad for it. Cheap or used tires, a cheap mattress, bottom shelf alcohol. For the alcohol, I generally mean that if I'm getting a drink at the bar, I don't mind spending an extra $1 or $2 for name brand instead of watered-down rubbing alcohol. Yes, I believe the hangover is worse with cheap spirits. Also, if you can't afford a ride home, you can't afford to go out drinking. For tires, I agree that if you have an old beater, you shouldn't be spending thousands on tires. However, I've gotten screwed over a few times with used tires that seemed like an excellent deal, only to be replaced in 10,000 miles. I put a pair of Toyo MTs on my old truck and they lasted me longer than the truck and still looked new after 50,000 miles. Plus, I had one punctured from an accident and it was replaced for free because I spent an extra $20 for that service up front. I can't stand seeing new sports cars that someone spent good money on and they won't spend more than $300 on tires. Also, everyone's saying if it separates you from the ground, this is exactly what I mean. As a closer, gas barbecues. If you only grill a few times a year, go ahead and spend under $500 on one. Just don't be upset when you can't get parts and have to replace the whole thing within 5 years. If you're a barbecue enthusiast that loves grilling for friends and family 5 times a week, spend $4,000 on a Twin Eagles or Lynx. It'll be the last grill you ever buy and sear a steak that would make Ramsay's mouth water. Yes, a $150 Weber charcoal kettle is an amazing grill that will last forever, but cooking 5 times a week on charcoal and needing more cooking area with different temperatures gets old real quick. Plus, a big green egg will smoke any Weber. I've spent the last 7 years designing outdoor kitchens and selling grills while having a private barbecue chef on staff. I think I'm just a bit more of a snob when it comes to my food. What's the most ridiculous or offensive thing someone has said to you? I have a prosthetic eye. While it looks pretty good, it doesn't look exactly like the other eye because, it's a prosthetic eye and all. But it's not that different and looks very natural. I was picking up some documents at a nearby store. When I took off my sunglasses, the following ensued. This lady said, "Oh, you have really bad allergies." Me?
No, ma'am, it's a prosthetic eye.
No, your eye, it has allergies. You should see a doctor.
Thank you. I see plenty of doctors about it, but it's a prosthetic eye.
No, you should see an allergy doctor.
At this point, I gave up and just stopped talking to her. While it was insulting, it was also just shocking that someone could be that dense. It's not that I think she didn't understand what prosthetic meant. She was middle-aged and spoke fluent English. She wasn't foreign or senile and seemed to understand what I said, but disagreed. Grr.
Why didn't you pop it out and hand it to her? Oh, I should have done that, but first pretended to rub it. Oh yeah, this itch is so bad. I'm gonna have to… Oh my God!
If I ever need a glass eye, I will definitely insist on creating one that has a red LED inside that I can somehow control, and make it come on as I glare at people like this. I have a prosthetic leg, and it's also very real looking, but I wear a knee support, so occasionally if I'm wearing shorts, someone will come up to me and insist I should go to the doctor to sort out my knee problems. Often people will think I'm joking when I tell them it's a false leg. One person, like the one in your story, wouldn't believe me at all, and was getting quite wound up about me taking the mickey. So what I did was say, fine, I'll get it checked out, it actually feels a little worse today. Then I grabbed my false leg where it joins up with my real knee and acted like I was massaging it. As I did so, I gently lifted my stump about an inch out of the socket and began to twist the false leg around, going, that feels so much better. I continued to massage and twist until the leg was completely backwards, with the foot pointing straight behind myself. Then I stretched myself up and said, yeah, that's the stuff, and walked off with one leg facing completely backwards. The look on the guy's face was priceless and worth the discomfort of walking with my stump backward in the socket. I work in a New Yorker hotel, but I'm a native South African. A guest once asked me to see my manager because I was faking an accent to tee her off. When he confirmed that I'm not local, she rebutted that she had a South African friend who sounded nothing like me. She was quite upset. I moved from South Africa to Colorado when I was 12, and people called me a liar, saying I was faking a British accent and I was very bad at it. After that, I gave up and put on a fake American accent. What the frick? Some people are so ignorant. I would like to ask all of our South African viewers to either forgive me or join the ranks of equally annoyed people from literally any country I've tried to imitate in previous videos. I had this really dumb co-worker. Not only was she dumb, but she would constantly browbeat everyone around with her ignorance. One of her more choice contentions was that Jews ripped off Yamaha's name for their little hat thingies. I have no idea how she rationalizes that. My ex-mother-in-law used to always give me these backhanded compliments. For example, "Oh, you got bangs, they really soften your face." Or, "Were you once really fat? You just have the kind of body that looks like it was once fat." My dachshund has half blue eyes. It often comes up in conversation when he's out in public, like at a dog park. One time, a lady asked me about his eyes. I was ready for the normal conversation. "No, it's not common. Yes, it's a sign of inbreeding." Instead, she insists that he's part husky. My dachshund. My 12-pound dachshund that looks like a dachshund. I tried to explain to her that there were other dog breeds, like dachshunds, that sometimes have blue eyes. Nope, my dog was part husky, but only in the eyes, because that's how it works. My Spanish teacher, she taught Spanish and German, and the rest of the class kept trying to talk to me in German and pronounce my name with a horrendous German accent because I have blonde hair and blue eyes. After a few minutes, I caught on and said, "Actually, I'm a second-generation Hungarian-American, and I have no idea what you guys are saying." They refused to believe that was a country, and insisted that if it was, it must be the same thing as Germany due to my appearance. I was born in Ohio and lived in the middle of a very Italian neighborhood. I was the only person with very pale skin and light features. A guy in a classroom of 13-year-old kids explained that it's his honest opinion that I should do my part in making the world a better place by taking my own life because I'm gay. So I ask, who else thinks that people like me should take their own lives? And 95% of the classroom raised their hand. Biggest what the frick moment I've experienced so far. What the frick? Where was this? It was in the Netherlands. Although the laws are good and most people are good, we're not the gay nirvana that foreigners sometimes believe it to be. I hear this many times from foreign gays who moved here. That incident is an outlier, of course, and the kids were just following the macho guy in the class. Don't let it bug you. Kids are freaking stupid and just don't understand, so they say what they do to fit in with all the other idiot morons.
I always wondered why older people hate teenagers when I was one, but now that I'm older, I'm only 25, I've realized why. I freaking hate teenagers. I think they're all a bunch of annoying, repetitive buttholes. Almost every single one of them will regret saying that in about 10 to 15 years. I know how bad I feel about being a jerk and a bully at that age. I'm albino, and I have vision problems because of it. I have to look at things very closely to read them. In high school, my French class had a substitute teacher. We were all quietly working on some homework, and of course, I was reading my book very close to my face. The substitute comes up to me and proceeds to tell me that I should really get glasses, not something that will fix my eyes. I try to explain to him that this isn't something that will help. Usually people leave me alone after I tell them this, but he kept going. The entire class was listening, and it was kind of mortifying, as my vision is something that has always made me feel slightly awkward and embarrassed. I finally said to him, "If you don't stop harassing me, I'm walking out right now, and trust me, I will not be the one getting in trouble for it." He shut up, but kept glancing my way for the rest of the class. In conclusion, I have crappy vision that can't be corrected, and someone was harassing me, telling me that it could be, and that I just needed glasses. We had a moment a bit like that with one of my friends who's colorblind. In a geography lesson, we were coloring in a map, and he colored the water purple accidentally. This was not long after we went to high school, so the teachers didn't really know about it yet, and the teacher then proceeds to accuse him of taking the mickey and threatening to speak to the head of the year about it. Many moons ago in Walmart, I asked an employee where they had the World of Warcraft game cards. A nearby middle-aged customer asked me in his most condescending voice, "How old are you?" My reply was, "Old enough to mind my own business. How about you?" Zing! Got him. As a gamer well into his adult years who loves board games and D&D, I thank you for your defense of our kind, good sir. When someone said, "I stopped being your friend because I didn't think celiac disease was a real thing." English class, senior year of high school. There was one dense B word that refused to believe that Venezuela, where I'm from, is an actual country. She was convinced it was a city in Mexico. End of the year, we have to hand in our papers. Now, this is high school, and I didn't really give a crap. I bullcrapped a 10-page paper, and apparently I've got some talent at writing essays, so I could usually bluff my way to a B or even an A. She sat next to me and was complaining that she did so much research and how unfair it was that she got a C. I got mine back, and she asks how I did. I handed her the paper, and she saw that I got an 85. She looked at it for a second, got up, walked over to the teacher, and accused me of plagiarism because he's Mexican, there's no way he could have written a better paper than me without cheating. Oy. It's alright, bro. Someone once asked me what part of Mexico Puerto Rico is in. There was a map right behind me. You should have said the Atlantic Ocean part. My hair color is light brown, but when my beard or facial hair grows in, it grows in red. I used to be a busboy at a fancy restaurant near the Cleveland airport, and I was working Sunday brunch. Well, it started to get towards the end of the brunch, and this guy was sitting at a table near some others that I was currently cleaning. He's on his Bluetooth headset, mid-conversation, and without even skipping a beat, says to his friend, "Hold on, one moment." Then he looks at me and says, "Excuse me, but are you Amish?" "You know, because your facial hair is red." I wasn't so much offended as I was thrown off guard. I looked at him with a half-fake smile and said, "No, sir, I'm not Amish. My facial hair just grows in red. The only part I have trouble reconciling is that there would be a fancy restaurant in Cleveland." My mother was friends with two sisters who were both wonderful people. One had an amazing singing voice and was very well known for this, while the other had a prosthetic leg from a childhood accident. One day, the sister with the prosthetic leg was approached from someone who asked, "So are you the one with the leg or the one that can't sing?" Our jaws dropped. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have a yeast allergy, so I can't have beer. I learned this when I was in high school and went to an allergist to get tested for food and environmental allergies. The doctor had drawn a circle on my arm and pricked me with the test for yeast, and in the time it took her to turn around to pick up the next allergen and turn back, the test site had swollen as large as the circle she had drawn and was getting bigger. The first thing she said was, "Whoa, no beer for you."
so clearly it's a severe allergy. Anyways, every time I go out with new people to the bar, I have to explain why I can't go in on a pitcher or a bucket, and that doesn't really bother me. They don't know, and it's a good conversation starter to fall back on with new people. But what bugs me is the 1 person out of 10 that then persists in trying to get me to drink beer anyway. All night. They use arguments like, if you've never drank beer, how do you know how you'll react? And, oh my god, your life will never be complete unless you drink beer with me right now. Or, are you sure? My cousin's brother-in-law's friend is allergic to gluten, but he can still have this beer. If I can't tell you that I can't have beer because I have a serious allergy, do you really want me to ruin the night for everybody by requiring emergency medical care? I have an ethanol allergy, and it's infuriating how many people don't believe it. They think I'm lying and I get insulted because they think I have a moral objection to drinking, and that I think I'm better than they are, like my refusal to drink is a judgment against them. Or waitstaff that don't bother to tell the chef, and chefs that are insulted and cook the dish their way anyway. And then I'm in anaphylaxis because they took it personally. It's amazing how people think they know someone else's body better than they do themselves. My brother calls me an alligator during fights because of my eczema. I hope you bite him really hard, then drag him into a nearby pond. That'll show him. Don't forget to do a barrel roll. Seriously, that's their freaking jam. That's how they kill things.
Mine calls me a crocodile because of my smack addiction.
I'm a Jewish girl with extremely pale skin and bright blue eyes. People who don't know about my cultural or religious background often describe them as Aryan eyes.
My significant other gets this a lot whenever she goes on holiday. People are D-bags and I frickin' hate it. But if the person's American, you can always turn it on their head and say, so by that logic, you murder Native Americans and steal their land because that's what your ancestor was probably doing as well. Hey, that's not fair. Don't forget the slaves too.
I'm living for all the saltiness in this group of stories today. More to come from our slighted kings and queens. I have something called cold urticaria, a skin allergy that causes me to develop hives when my skin is cold, and I've had it since I was 2 years old. It's not nearly as severe as it was when I was a kid. It almost killed me twice because I live in Wisconsin, but since it hadn't mostly resolved itself until my late teens, I was disqualified to donate blood plasma. So I'm a bit disappointed, make a status on my Facebook about it, and my aunt comments on it and we talk to each other for a bit. At the time, I worked at McDonald's, and I had a manager who was a bit of a know-it-all F-face, who liked to act knowledgeable about things he knew absolutely nothing about. Sometimes he'd spout off some crappy lecture for the heck of it, without even knowing what the frick he was talking about. I think he just liked to hear the sound of his own voice. Anyway, he saw my status and conversation on Facebook, and while we and a few other co-workers were all talking about something unrelated, he brings up, "So I saw on Facebook that you couldn't donate plasma." Yeah, I'm allergic to the cold and it drops your body temperature, so I was disqualified from donating. That's stupid, you can't be allergic to something like that. He then proceeded to try and argue with me about it, telling me that my parents were hypochondriacs, telling me my doctors were stupid, saying that an allergy like that doesn't exist, saying that if I have anything, it would have been eczema. I mean, frick, if that particular allergy didn't exist, I would have been able to donate my gosh darn fricking plasma. And then there's the fact that he had the nerve to try and call me out on that in front of all our co-workers, to try and make me look like a stupid liar. That teed me off so bad I wanted to stick his stupid face in the gosh darn deep fryer. Ugh, just thinking about it right now is teeing me off. Then later, after failing to make me look like a moron in front of everyone, because multiple people were backing me up, knowing what a dillhole he is, he tried to make it so I wasn't teed off at him anymore and convinced me to agree to disagree. That night, I deleted him off my Facebook so he wouldn't try to pull crap like that again. Just writing this story makes me so mad. I want to drive over there, see if he's working, and punch him in the face. I mean, this wasn't the only thing he did that teed me off. He was generally really obnoxious and annoying, and the only manager I had at that workplace that really teed me off all the time. Gosh darn it, what a moron. In a class in college, we were talking about organ transplants, and the professor asked if anybody had any personal stories about it. And I said I had a liver transplant and told a bit of my story. A girl, after, raised her hand and said, "I think we should stop everything like that because the world is overpopulated as it is." I stared, completely in shock that she'd say that right after I said I would have died years ago if it wasn't for a transplant. I think it would have been appropriate to stand up, point at her, and say, "Frick you too, madam." Bet the professor wouldn't have even been that annoyed.
When I was a kid, I crashed into a set of trees while sledding. The trees were so slim that my leg got twisted around them. It took a few minutes for my sister and nephews to get it out, and all the while I'm screaming and crying. I hobble inside the house, freaking out because the pain was so bad I thought it was broken. I go to my parents for help, and they took one look at me and say, "Stop whining, it doesn't hurt," and went off to do what they were previously doing. I collapsed from the pain and had to go crawl up the stairs to my room. All the while my stepmom's standing over me calling me a faker and a liar and telling me to stop being so dramatic. I ended up passing out in the upstairs living room from the pain and dizziness. My leg wasn't broken, but I think it did get somewhat effed up, since I walk with a limp to this day. Gosh darn, you're still doing that fake limp thing? Drama queens. I mean, really? Sincerely, your stepmom. While giving my information to a store so I could rent video games. The store employer, name, me, Diana, yes, that's my real name, proceeded to spell my name. Are you sure? Doesn't it have 2 N's? No, just the one. Are you sure? I hand her my driver's license. Pretty darn tootin'. Oh, okay. I have a good one. My grandmother who has Alzheimer's disease lives with us, and she recently had a UTI. While in the hospital, she had a permanent catheter installed, and when she finally came home, a nurse, a bit of a B-word I might add, came and showed my parents how to empty her bag. The nurse claimed that my grandma didn't have Alzheimer's, but was confused because memory loss can be apparently a symptom of a UTI. Even after my parents showed the nurse documentation, she still persisted. It was enough to mildly tee off my dad and upset my mum. I hid the fact that I was deeply mentally unwell and was on medication from my mum for months because I knew she wouldn't handle it well. When I did tell her about it, she said that I was faking it and using it as an excuse for my poor grades, which happened because of how severe my depression was. She told me that I was using my medication as a crutch. This is from the woman who's trying to use her medicated bipolar to get into disability allowance. My name is Eli. Everyone insists on calling me Elijah even when I say my name is just Eli. One of my coworkers will comment on how Asian my hairstyle or outfit was on any given day, complete with appreciative leers when I look more Asian than usual. I'm a little curious as to what that coworker in question feels would be particularly Asian attire, I'm going to be honest. My name is Ian. Simple, right? I-A-N. Nope, not apparently. The most common spelling of my name when I tell it to people is E-A-N, followed by just E-N and E-U-M. I don't have a speech impediment or anything. The worst was E-E-Y-U-M. Eeyum. Not one letter was correct. Not one. I had a coworker named Earl. He once cut a letter addressed to Fartle. When I was 3, I got a huge cut from an accident in my house. I can't remember. And when I was taken to hospital, my parents actually had the piece of skin that was torn off. Only God knows why, and there was enough of the skin to sew it back on with stitches. So now I have a huge scar. One day, a D-bag friend of mine asked me about my scar, and I tell him the above story. Then he proceeded to go on a 10-minute rant about how medical technology has not advanced far enough to do a procedure like that. I lose all hope in humanity at this point for people living under rocks like this. I broke my foot in 2 places in October. I was sitting down on the floor in gym before class because I was exhausted. Some girl walked up to me and kicked me as hard as she could on my boot. I was bawling, and all she could say was, "I wanted to see if it was really broken." She ended up re-breaking my foot and setting my recovery back 2 months. Although it doesn't happen often, as a Japanese American, I get occasional crap about the atrocities Japan committed during World War II. It doesn't make much sense considering my great-grandparents came to the US around 1900 to 1920. Also, my grandfathers both fought in the US Army during the war too, the 442nd Segregated Regiment. Not really offensive, but ridiculous. Her, where did you adopt your kids from? Me, I didn't. Then where did you get them? I made them, with my wife. Explanation, my wife is Chinese while I'm one of many flavors of vanilla, so my kids look Asian-ish. When I talk to someone on the late bus in 7th grade, I find it's fun to communicate with the losers, said the girl. Frick you, Melissa. That set back the recovery of my social anxiety by a few years. Congrats on getting knocked up at 19. A coworker of mine, who'd started working probably a couple of weeks prior to this, asked me out of the blue and all of a sudden, "So are you like trans or something?" What offended me wasn't that she thought I looked like MTF, or the possibility of someone seeing me as trans, it was that she saw a tall, flat-chested, homely girl and reasoned that the girl must have been born a boy. Also, who asks a stranger something so personal in the first place? What is something you or someone you saw did just to watch the world burn? I'm a high school science teacher. At least once a year we'll start a rumor about one of us getting arrested for something. A coworker of mine told some students that I dressed up as Selena Gomez for Halloween once. It's been over a year and I still get kids that like to yell, "Hi Selena!" I also toot while walking by students who I don't like for whatever reason. Crop dusting crappy students is one of my favorite parts of being a teacher. For a while I had a townhouse where I had a bathroom window that overlooked the parking lot. Sometimes I would sit there with my key fob and hit the lock button so that the horn on my car would honk right when people walked by, just to watch them jump. In the early 90s, universal remote controls were new. I had a grudge against a local AV store, so I got one of the programmable remotes, and in the middle of the night I turned on everything in the store through the window and upped all the volumes to max. Once a week for months on end. Oh, I had a buddy that did this in high school. Whenever the teacher would attempt to show a movie in class, he'd use the universal remote to turn the TV off just as the teacher sat down. She was convinced the TV was haunted. You can buy a code-free universal remote that fits on your keyring. I had one and it was pretty handy at bars. My friend's girlfriend was complaining on Facebook about vomiting and feeling nauseous. I made a joke teasing her about morning sickness and congratulating her on the baby. The next hour had her wall blowing up with family and friends who took it seriously, congratulating her. Needless to say, I got a good laugh. This is a very bold move, and I'm sick because I kind of love how messed up it is. I wonder if her parents were friends with her on Facebook. A reply to this follows. Dude, this Christmas I had most of my family over for dinner, and out of nowhere, Cousin A went up to Cousin B, touched her belly and said, "How's the baby going?" jokingly. Cousin B froze, and it turns out she really was pregnant and planning on announcing it that night. Take a piece of paper and spread a thin layer of corn flour on the paper. Slide the piece of paper under a door and use a can of compressed air to blow the corn flour off the paper and onto everything on the other side of the door. The person who enters the room will find a thin layer of the powder coating quite a bit of the room. When they go to clean it up, they will inevitably use a damp cloth, and that is when the magic occurs. If you've ever played with corn flour and water, you know it becomes a non-Newtonian fluid, and these properties make it a nightmare to clean up. When you apply pressure, it's this stubborn, gloopy solid mess on the wall, but when you release the pressure, it starts to freely run down the wall like a liquid. Every Christmas, I take an ugly ornament off our tree and put it on someone else's, usually during a party or something. I have yet to be caught. One time I did something to watch the world burn, and it completely backfired in my face. It was the worst prank in the history of my life. I was a dumb child. I got superglue and I went around my house gluing down things that I thought people would rarely use. Top shelf picture frame, old scarf in my mum's bottom drawer, dictionary on the bookshelf, etc. About 20 things in total. I thought that people would come across these things over the course of months, that they would become confused and not understand how it kept happening. It was going to be my secret glory. My mum came across every single item in the course of a day. She cleans the house a lot more often than I anticipated. It was bad. Real bad. Most of the guys on the team I work with are quite overweight and have different opinions on weight loss. They also love being right. It's pretty simple to say, does, insert food here, make you, insert random weight or loss gain symptom, here? And then wait for the argument to explode, and put my headphones back on whilst they argue. I work in a pizza shop. Every time someone orders 10 wings, I always put in 11, just hoping that whoever ordered those wings plans on splitting them evenly. And I've just started a war within the household over who gets that last wing. If I ordered chicken wings and got an extra one free, I would just think the guy who made them was being nice for no reason other than that he's a nice guy. I go onto random YouTube videos and write the word fake when it clearly isn't and just watch the crap storm that develops. I stole an entire place setting from the old spaghetti factory one piece at a time. A salad plate, dinner plate, bowl, glass, spoon, fork, knife, and even a bread knife. It took months. Then one day I went there for dinner with everything in a messenger bag, right before I left it set up on the table.
Whenever I visit a friend or a relative's place, I turn the magnets on their fridge upside down. Never been caught. I have, however, heard complaints of, "Someone keeps turning my gosh darn magnets upside down," once or twice. Lived in a neighborhood called Caroline Pines. One night, we switched the E and the I on the sign to make Caroline word for male anatomy. Stayed like that for 4 days. My buddy used to live in a neighborhood called Bantam Woods, and we got hammered one night and changed it to Batman Woods.
Should have changed it to Batman's Wood.
In junior year of high school, my class was given a 200-question test to do in an hour and a half. Some kid convinced everyone to white out the corner of the Scantron, so the professor had to mark every single answer by hand in a class of 30. He had to do it, and the average was 84.
Something like this happened at my school, and the teacher failed every test.
In 4th grade, I created a club called the Safety Patrol Busters. I'm not sure how common Safety Patrol kids are, or if it's still done, but they were the kids who volunteered to make sure other kids weren't doing anything unsafe, like running. If they caught you running, they'd yell at you to stop and go back and walk. During recess, me and the other boys in the club would seek out the Safety Patrol kids in their orange vests and run as fast as we could past them. When they yelled stop, we'd keep running. This would usually cause them to give chase. We had this secret hiding spot underneath the portable classroom buildings, trailers, where we'd hide out and watch them try to find us. They never caught the Safety Patrol busters, ever. I don't mean to be that kind of jerk, but when I was 17, I decided to go and buy some groceries at a Giant store or some equivalent. As I walked around, I saw some very strict-looking mums, and I had the brilliant idea of putting some random unhealthy food in their shopping carts, unnoticed, and let the kids take the blame. I thought I'd see what the mums would do. These mums, I could hear them from 2 aisles away, screaming at their children as they all denied putting the 6-pack of chocolate pudding, or 2 packs of Mountain Dew, or 4 boxes of Lucky Charms in the shopping cart. Senior year of high school, I taught 3 kids how to use any phone on campus to page over the loudspeakers. That was a hilarious week. To those curious, my school had an odd PA setup that could be used via punching in the correct extension from one of the school phones. I don't know why it was set up this way. The teachers didn't use it, probably weren't allowed, and the morning announcements were always done from the office where the actual PA mic was. Obviously, they've since changed this. I would pay actual money to hear the announcements. I know that, being kids, there was a high likelihood that it was just tooting noises and words for anatomy, but they can also be very creative in ways that we can't. I know that when I've worked with kids, they've nearly killed me laughing several times. I work at Disney World, that's the one in Florida. I found a list of the phone numbers to all the rides at Disneyland, California. I used to dial the Dumbo ride in Florida, and then before they answered, conference to the Dumbo ride in California. Both would answer, "Dumbo, this is so-and-so," and I'd just sit on mute, listening to them trying to figure out who the real so-and-so working at Dumbo was. No one ever said, "Wait, are you in Florida or California?" Put Skittles and M&Ms in the same bowl.
They are appropriate snacks at some parties, as you now have S&Ms.
My daughter has amazing hand-eye coordination and can throw with scary accuracy. We're a family that loses our crap when people in movie theaters talk or text or make noise. Some guy a few rows ahead kept pulling out his phone to check Facebook during the movie. I dared my daughter to throw a milk dud at his phone, and she hit it each time he pulled it out. Finally, he stopped. Then he put his feet up on the seat ahead of him where another person was sitting, so she started pelting his foot. Eventually, he sat like a perfect gentleman with nary a movement or phone check. This doesn't sound like watching the world burn, but rather keeping the world from burning. Good story, though. I jaywalked yesterday while a parking cop watched. I made eye contact. I built a dummy when I was 10 or so. My friends and I would stand in the front yard with it, wait until a car came by, and then beat the crap out of it. We'd tear his head off or put him in a hangman's noose and throw him in the street. He was about our size too, so people usually thought we were beating up another kid. They'd slam on the brakes or get out of the car to chew us out. One time we attached his hands to the second-story windowsill so it looked like he was hanging on for dear life, and some lady called 911. That was the end of that. We had an empty block of land next door to our house when I was a teenager, with a tall fence across the front. I used to drag our trampoline over to the fence, climb onto the neighbor's adjoining brick fence and wait for someone to walk past before yelling, "Swan dive!"
and doing one onto the trampoline. From their perspective, it looked like I was doing a belly flop onto solid ground, and I never failed to get a reaction. In middle school, we would have a bathroom break right after lunch every day. When we went to do our business, a kid in my class started laughing maniacally while peeing in one of the urinals and proceeded to aim his pee into the corner of the bathroom. He kept laughing as his pee covered the floor, and for some freaking reason, 3 other kids started doing the same thing. By the time they were done, there was a pool covering about a third of the floor space. That would have been bad enough, but then 4 of them started to jump around and splash people. Fricking kids. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked as a camp counselor for a long time, and when I was supervising a big area alone, I'd bring all of my water guns. I hate participating in water fights, but I love watching them. My favorite thing to do is to give a water gun to one kid and encourage them to be as obnoxious as possible, watching while everyone else in the area grows to slowly hate them. Then I'll start passing them out to the other obnoxious kids and build my own little squad of terror. But the real fun comes when I engineer their demise by slowly arming a resistance against them. Brother begins turning on brother, and I watch like Caligula atop my tall rock, dry and sipping bug juice. The goal is to have a full-on war breakout by the time someone else is supposed to take over for me. In my 8th grade English class, we occasionally critiqued each other's assignments by leaving a comment on the back and then passing it to the person next to us, until everyone had reviewed each paper. One day, I decided to write "I heart Brandon," I'm Brandon, on every single paper. Eventually, my teacher noticed and got really upset that someone wasn't taking the task seriously. She instantly accused my girlfriend, who happened to be in the class and was always doodling girly stuff on her binder instead of paying attention. My girlfriend, full of adolescent emotions, erupted into tears while proclaiming her innocence. After a moment, my girlfriend's tears of embarrassment turned into tears of rage when she realized that if she hadn't written the message, another girl probably had. She got up out of her chair and started yelling and pointing at another girl, accusing her of trying to break us up. The other girl denied doing it and then started firing vulgar insults right back at my girlfriend. At this point, everyone in the class was yelling and cheering on the verbal slugfest, until eventually my teacher got everyone under control. Needless to say, I could have stopped the ordeal at any moment. I still smile just thinking about it. I worked as a wilderness guide this summer. Among my duties was packing food for the kids, ages 14 through 18, whom I would bring into the wilderness for 5 to 10 days. Every meal, chewy granola bars were involved. I would always pack 11, for 12 kids, of the same flavor, usually s'mores, and then one wild card. The kids would get so sick of the s'mores by day 2 or 3, and it was the funniest thing in the world to watch them fight over the special flavor. Real Lord of the Flies stuff. There are 2 break rooms on my floor at work, and each of them has a few cupboards full of dishes and coffee cups. Each break room pretty much is the same distance from my cubicle. Each day I make a cup of tea in one break room, and when done, I put it in the other's dishwasher. I roped in a coworker who sits next to me to do this as well. It was only a matter of a few weeks before people were complaining about how one break room had way too many coffee cups, and the other one always had none. Near the end of the school year, I found a stash of permanent markers in the staff room of the elementary school in which I taught. This school required all students to remove outdoor footwear and place them on shelves near the exits. On the last day of school, I put a gift marker in each shoe. After school, I relaxed on the playground and watched. At any instant, I could see all of the stages of the prank play out. The surprised discovery, the opening and testing of the pen, the tentative line drawn down the stair rail, and the expanding cloud of graffiti spreading out from each doorway. I have 2 really crappy roommates. They won't clean, they use my crap all the time, play music and video games really loud until 4 AM sometimes. Anyway, I like to mess with them a lot by doing little things to annoy them. For instance, one of them is really short and I'm 6'4", so sometimes I put stuff that he uses a lot on really high shelves or places where he can't see them. One of them is constantly playing my Xbox on my TV, even when I want to play, so one time before I went out of town for the weekend, I put clear tape over the CD drive so it wouldn't open, and it actually just looked really like the Xbox broke. So that was fun. When I came back, it magically worked perfectly. Just little things to annoy them until I can get the frick out of there. I had a big tub full of jelly beans when I was a kid, and my cousin dumped in a bag of those Harry Potter ones with flavors like grass and booger. There weren't a lot of them, but there were enough that every once in a while you would unexpectedly gag. I don't know if any of our listeners are old enough to remember these, but the Bertie Bott's every flavor beans were absolutely disgusting. If you did this in a communal bowl of jelly beans rather than one's relatives, you would raise hell. I hold the doors open for people who are more than 7 feet away just to watch them do that stupid half jog. I really enjoy it when they thank me through gritted teeth and labored breath. I love when people do this. I intentionally walk slower just to be that guy. I've had people give up and just let go of the door and walk away. This doesn't work for me. I love making situations awkward, so I will stand there with an awkward smile on my face. I might even do an awkward half wave and call you Jeff. One day, while living in a house with 4 other roommates, a hat blew into our yard and landed on the back step, which was the main entrance. It was upright on the bottom step like someone had placed it there. All of us thought it was weird and moved on with our lives. That same week, I went to the thrift store and bought all the weirdest cheap hats I could find. Each Tuesday, I would place an increasingly weirder hat on the back porch on my way to class. Our landlord's conspiracy theories ranged from the Mad Hatter to homeless people to one of our friends leaving the hats. I kept this up until we had a collection of 30-plus hats in our closet. They didn't believe that it was me when I told them. Fake items boxes or bananas on the ramp for the shortcut in Koopa Troopa Beach. That is just messed up. Singapore is a weird place. It's an especially weird place for an American teen. An even weirder time when our classmate was arrested at our school and was caned. Well, Singaporeans tend to be reserved and not very outgoing. We Americans were generally more outgoing, and sometimes we used to make Singaporeans uncomfortable. For example, the bus stop was about half a mile from my house. On the way, we'd walked by a big house with a few guards. My friend was with me and told me the Prime Minister lived there. Again, really small country. So we walked up to the guards and started to shake their hands and just started talking to them. They were so flustered and confused, because no one has ever done that. We weren't threatening anyone, it was just us two and we were really friendly. It was the middle of the day and we were just 16 and posed no threat. It's a normal neighborhood after all, and we had backpacks on and school uniforms. After about 3 minutes, they were extremely nervous, because they weren't trained for this. Seeing a trained guard meant to handle threats, not having any idea what to do with people being friendly to him, was unbelievably hilarious to us. We had our fun and we left. I invited both the conservatives and the liberal groups at my university to the same pub during the 2012 US presidential elections. Fisticuffs were had. When I worked at the school cafeteria, I learned my fellow college students treated cafe workers like crap. So since it was my job to keep the salad bar stocked, I never ever put the low-fat options out. It's like the dumbest act of passive aggression I ever did, but I really hoped some of those buttholes got big. I used to white out the page numbers in my school textbooks, usually in large groups of 20 or 30 pages. I always choose the middle urinal. My friend has a wife that has a bit of a jealous streak. One day, while I was hanging out at his place, we were arguing about something and he made a pretty personal insult. So I turned to his wife and say, "Hey, did he ever tell you about Rebecca?" He shot up off the couch with a look on his face that I can only describe as a combination of fear, anger, and a desire to murder me and started yelling, "He's a fricking liar! Don't believe a word he says!" The guy was being a royal prick to me and everyone around him, just a loud D-bag. It was at a local resale store and I was holding this old 90s VHS video recorder, and when he saw it, he went apecrap over wanting it so bad. He even tried to take it out of my hands at one point, which almost got his butt kicked 6 ways to Sunday. Well, I didn't even really want it, but I paid $20 for it. This guy wanted it so badly he followed me outside and offered something like $40 for it, and that I would be stupid not to take it. I didn't say a gosh darn word. I stared his butt down for about 5 seconds before walking to the dumpster by the side of the building. Just with all of my force and all of my might, I spiked that fricking VHS down into the empty metal dumpster. It hit with such force, lots of little plastic and metal bits came flying up, and that recorder was effed. The look on his face made it so worth it. I started laughing hysterically all the way to my car, and as I was driving away, he was still just open-mouthed and staring at me. I lost my voice the next day from laughing for so long and so hard. The KLF, an extremely successful British acid house duo, ended up with about £1 million on their hands. What did they do? They took it to an island off Scotland and burned it.
I think the most normal thing one can do to ensure the world burns is deny climate change.
In high school, we went around late at night during an election and swapped people's lawn signs with one from the other party. I'm a line cook at a restaurant, and just a few months after starting there, we went through some major management changes. The proprietor had just quit and the head chef fired under questionable circumstances. A lot of the staff seemed pretty loyal to them and felt more like family. The days and weeks that followed were filled with hot tempers and a lot of women crying. One morning, a new lady chef was making herself a cup of coffee and commented that it tasted funny, concluding she hadn't rinsed the pot out well enough. Nobody thinks anything of it, and we continue about our workday. I'm working the next morning, and one of the prep cooks noticed that something he's cooking tasted funny, and I remembered about the coffee from the morning before. After an investigation, he concludes that someone had mixed powdered laundry soap in the big bin of sugar. Thousands and thousands of dollars of food were thrown out that morning. Everything made in the past few days with sugar. Nobody knows if and how many customers were served tainted food, but authorities were notified, and ultimately no cases of illness came up. It's a pretty unanimous opinion that a prep cook who had quit a few days before was the culprit, but to my knowledge, no charges have been filed. What are your worst college roommate horror stories? When I was a freshman, my roommate basically had his girlfriend, whose own room was on our floor, move into our small dorm. They were banging all the time for 4 solid months. I'm waking up, they're screwing. Go to sleep, screwing. Get back from class, they're screwing. It was completely out of hand. It was every day at least 5 times for months. There were empty bulk protection boxes everywhere on his side. I basically couldn't be in my room. One day, I just wanted to come home from a long day, sit down and play Mortal Kombat with my friends in my room. But you guessed it, my room was locked. I went to our lounge, dejected, and told my friends, I really just want to walk in there, sit down, and play just to spite them. One friend looked up at me and said, "Why don't you?" I was shocked. Then I nodded and said, "Yeah, why don't I? Let's go, boys." So without even knocking, 12 people followed me as I unlocked the door, walked in, refused to acknowledge them, turned on my Xbox, and we played for hours. They just sat there for a while dumbfounded. That's the same week I changed rooms. Next one wasn't too much better, but at least I could be in it. My roommate kidnapped 2 guys and held them for ransom. One hostage was set free weeks later, while the other wasn't so lucky. The body was eventually found in a basement, buried in the ground. I rented a room in an apartment there. He lived in it before I moved in. So the cops busted in and apprehended my roommate while he was sleeping. Tried for kidnapping and manslaughter along with a few of his other associates. This was in Ontario, Canada, around 2011-2012. I never really followed the story until after I moved the heck out, and then I learned that they were all in jail. My roommate was Sahib Malik. He seemed like a normal, nice guy. Student at the local university. Had no problems with him, aside from him using my kitchen knife without permission. My cousin is an international college student who had just moved here and barely spoke any English. He moved in with another roommate to offset the ridiculous cost of a New York apartment. His roommate met a pretty cute girl. However, he discussed it with my cousin and agreed that there was something odd about the girl. He didn't want to fully commit to a relationship just yet, but they still hooked up. My cousin also said that his roommate still talked to other girls but didn't move further than that. One day, my cousin and his roommate were having breakfast in the kitchen. The girl had slept over the night before. The girl wakes up and goes into the kitchen and picks up a knife and then stabs the roommate in the neck 3 times. My cousin freezes in shock but then picks up his chair and tried to fend her away. She then takes the knife and stabs herself in the chest. Everyone survives. My cousin cried and called my dad, telling him he hates America and wants to go back to China. Well, that went a million times further than I think any of us could have predicted. As a non-American, I can neither confirm nor deny whether insane crimes of passion are a regular thing in the student dorms there. She got mad when I moved her clothes to the dryer after they'd been sitting in the washer for a day and a half. I just set their wet clothes on top of the dryer if they didn't move them in a timely manner. If they complained, I'd just tell them I didn't know what in their wash was dryer safe. Besides, it was likely when my wash was done, their clothes would still be in the dryer anyways. I'm in college and my roommate currently likes to crank it and leave his used splooge tissues all over the floor. I've told him to clean up after himself a million times. No flushing or throwing them away. It grosses me out so bad, and I never bring my girlfriend to the house because of it. Buy some tongs. The next time you see one, put it in a random place. Shove one in his shoe.
Put some in his backpack, in the pockets of his jeans or sweaters, in between his bedsheets. Get creative, man. The B-word didn't pay rent for 3 months, and we didn't know until after our lease was up. Was just resolved 6 months ago, and I graduated 2 years ago. I will never sign a joint lease again. I had a roommate that would mix booze and pills. One night, she fell asleep with her adult fun toy doing its thing. She woke up when the batteries ran out. At least she had some fun dreams. I've never resided in a college dorm, but I just wanted to share that once I was in a Skype call with my good friend who does reside in a dorm, who left his mic on when he left for an extended period of time, allowing me and the other 2 people in our call to hear all his roommates, like 5 other guys, arguing about who ate the last Pop-Tart. It got pretty intense. Is this what dorm life is like? Freshman year college had bunk beds. Drunk roommate comes home before me. He sleeps on top. He drank too much, and he wet the bed. Like an open fire hydrant, apparently. I came home later and sat down in a flash flood puddle in my completely soaked mattress. Here's how it went. I got home, sat on bed, squish sound, butt is wet. What the frick? I feel his mattress above from where I'm sitting, and it's wet. I stand up and I look at him sleeping in soaked sheets above me. Proceed to yell at him. Needless to say, I threw it in the shower and told him to get me a new one. Apparently, this isn't that uncommon, and the magic pee theory still holds up. My favorite roommate story is from freshman year. My roommate came home drunk one night and wandered into the dorm basement. She was too drunk to find a bathroom, so she peed in the dryer. Not the washing machine, the dryer. I'm half horrified and half impressed, given the fact that it was a front loader. And in an incredible twist of fate, the next day she forgot her clothes in the washing machine. Some kind gentleman paid to put them in the dryer for her, and it just so happened that it was the one she had peed in the night before. Sometimes I think karma isn't real, and then I read a story like this. Sharon used to eat in her room and then slide the plate under her bed. She'd do this every day until my roommate and I couldn't bear the stink anymore and needed plates for our own dinner. She also regularly invited her substance-dealing boyfriend over to hang out in our apartment during the day. Several times I came home to find deals taking place in our living room. Eventually, the cops were called by one of our neighbors and we, not him, were interrogated and searched. Oh, and there's the time she left a sanitary towel sunny side up on the toilet seat in our shared bathroom. She had some kind of fungal scalp condition that caused her hair to fall out in clumps, which we would frequently have to pull out of plug holes. She then announced she had scabies, and I decided to just lock myself in my room until she moved out. Bizarrely, according to Facebook, she seems to have grown up to become a normal, functioning adult. My first roommate. Oh, the memories. Very heavy, very socially awkward, and definitely psychotic. Often mumbled to himself with shifty eyes, ate my food, and was either railing against the evils of religion or trying to get me to join the Army of the Virgin or some other Catholic sect. He often lounged about in his tighty-whities and refused to clothe himself if I had a guest or girls over. He would just sit down and put a blanket over his lap. I walked in on him cranking it or blaring adult movies a number of times with which he used my tissues. He would also have long phone arguments with his girlfriend, who according to the wallet photo he had of her, was Greedily from Captain Planet. The kicker for me was when he had a breakdown and called the RA and a counselor to talk with him while I was writing a paper. He was highly agitated and at one point said, "I just looked over at my roommate while he was asleep and I thought to myself, I should just take a knife and kill him then myself. No offense, John." I was in the zone with my paper, so I automatically replied, "None taken." Then did a double take as the horror dawned on me. Nonplussed eye contact with my RA. I noped the frick out and moved to a different floor. My roommate shaved his chest hair in the kitchen. He also had a super loud Asian girlfriend who screamed during the doing of the deed, even when we had people over. My freshman roommate installed a sliding bolt on the door to our shared room so that I couldn't enter while he was in bed with girls he brought in, which was so random I could never tell when he'd be using the room. The worst part was when I'd get back very late, wanting to get into the room and go to sleep, and he'd have me locked out in the hallway, especially when I had an early class. Even when I waited patiently in the hall, he refused to unlock the door, until one night I knocked harder and he threw a glass full of ice water in my face as he finally opened it. My roommate and his girlfriend's anniversary happened to be on Valentine's Day. On the morning of, I awoke to the smell of chocolate fondue and noticed him making chocolate-dipped strawberries. I commented on how nice he was for doing that, to which he replied, "Yeah, and if she's lucky she'll get my chocolate-dipped wang afterwards." Now, I thought he was joking, but later that night I heard a scream, not out of the ordinary if you know what their bedroom life was like, but that's another story, followed by the door slamming. I went on with my night and figured it was not a big deal. The next morning I saw him in our kitchen and he apologized for the scream. Me being naive, I asked what had happened. His actual response was, "I wanted to give her dessert, so I poured the fondue right onto my eggplant." He then had rushed to the hospital to get his burns treated. I could never look at him or chocolate fondue the same. Well, he had an idea and he committed to it. Gotta respect that. In other news, I'm not sure I'll ever be able to eat either cheese or chocolate fondue again in my life. My freshman roommate was an okay guy, but we didn't really have a ton in common. I think the housing department matched us up simply because we both liked ska music. The guy seemed kind of asexual. He had friends but never had guests, and I couldn't tell if he was gay or straight or what. Keep in mind that in those days, even in the most enlightened circles, some people tried to stay in the closet. Now, one of the things I regret most about college was drinking to excess, and I'd get blotto where I remembered very little about the nights before. One night I was way too hammered and I don't even remember how I got back to my room. But I woke up around 4 a.m. to the oddest dream, which was that while I passed out, my roommate came over to my bed, took off his pants and climbed on top of me. In the dream, I woke up while he was pulling down my pants and I rolled over and with one solid push, shoved him across the room where he crashed into his bed in his tighty-whities. I was a lot bigger and stronger than him and sent him flying. I can still see the image of him hitting his bed like it was yesterday. I went back to being passed out and later woke up remembering that weird dream. My roommate was gone, but later that day I saw him and he had a swollen lip. I'd like to give people the benefit of the doubt, so I'm not going to say for sure what happened, but a couple of weeks later, one of the guys next door asked me if I wanted to swap roommates and move into his room, and I said yes in a flash. This was 1986, by the way, in a very liberal and gay-friendly college. But even then, there was still a stigma about homosexuality. After we graduated, I heard several stories of people from college who eventually came out. I never cared, but some gay people were still nervous, and unfortunately, there were still some people who were homophobes.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I had a roommate that cranked it, constantly. I would open the door, which was an old-school push combination lock, so it took a few seconds, thank God, and enter. And he'd be shutting his monitor off with his hand over his pants. This seriously happened so much that I actually had to have a talk with him about it, after bringing girls over once in a while who would catch him in the act with me and suddenly no longer be in the mood. I don't have a problem with him having a bit of fun with himself, God knows I did it too, but I would catch him twice a week. If I gave you an honest guess, I'd say that he did it more than 5 times a day. Once he did it when I was just going downstairs to the dorm vending machine. I walked down and back up in like 3 minutes and he was hiding his shame already. Freshman year, I got bunked up with an extra roommate due to over-enrollment. A cramped dorm room with 3 guys in it. For a while, things were pretty fun and we were all friends. But after about 2 months, one roommate had a few disgusting habits. First, he instead of walking literally across the hallway to the bathroom, would pee in an empty or half-empty Gatorade bottle and just let them sit in the open. That was gross. But then he started crapping in takeout boxes and letting them sit all night or day until me and the other roommate got back to yell at him. The third thing is he had a shoebox collection of used rubbers to be cranked into. The smell was so horrendous and awful, it took the RA and whoever else was in charge of housing a month to finally relocate me and the other guy and eventually kick the gross dude out. So for nearly an entire semester, at any time you could walk into our room and see crap in a container with leftovers still in it, a mosaic of different colored pee bottles, or a soggy shoebox on his desk filled with used rubbers. He never went to class and would play video games on his computer until 5 a.m. every day. I still think back on it nearly 10 years later, and I'm blown away with how long it took for any administrative intervention to happen. I mouthed, "What the actual frick" to myself so many times while reading that. How did you cope all that time? Spent some nights in the library or couch crashing at a friend's. Sometimes yelling at him enough would get him to clean up and at least keep his nasty box locked away. But after a couple of days, he would start filling his bottles and boxes again. The guy had no shame, no hygiene, and no respect for those around him. Horrible guy destined to live in a crappy basement apartment, bouncing from one minimum wage job to the next. My roommate once invited a girl that was kicked out of her house to stay with us. Keep in mind that our dorm room was barely larger than a prison cell. I listened to them do the deed on the bottom bunk more times than I care to remember. Your roommate definitely thinks you're the crappy roommate for not leaving when they wanted to do the deed. My roommate just gave me Chipotle money when he wanted to do the deed with his girlfriend. My first year, one of my roommates had his girlfriend over for the weekend. He asked me and my other roommate last minute to clear out for 30 minutes of football Sunday, so they could just get it on. This was like the fourth time he'd asked that weekend, with us agreeing each time, but whatever. He didn't get to see his girlfriend that often, so fair enough. I leave and came back 45 minutes later. She's still there, but they're just talking and the door was open. All clear, right? Around 10 minutes later, he asks me to give them a second and I tell him I'll be in the lounge and to text me when I'm good to come back. He didn't text me. I stayed there for over an hour waiting, but once a friend walked through, I asked him to check if they were still in our room. Nope. He had just left and never told me, while I wasted an hour not watching football. He brought this up in an argument months later, saying that I was a butt for walking in well after the time he'd asked me to stay out, and that he purposefully didn't text me because he was teed off. What the frick? How am I the butthole when I agreed to every single thing he asked? How am I supposed to know that door wide open and just sitting on the bed chatting is code for stay out? Now I'm angry about this all over again. I haven't seen him around the university in forever, so I hope he dropped out. One of my roommates was accused of attempting the unspeakable act on the other during a night of drunken escapades. I had a housemate, 4-person house by the way, who I asked to take care of my dog over one weekend. I never left any of the responsibilities associated with my dog up to anyone else because the rest of the guys were doing me a huge favor by letting me have him there in the first place. This one huge mate wasn't a huge fan of the dog, and when I came home after the weekend, there was crap and pee in my room where presumably my dog was kept most of the weekend. His food and water were in there too, so I guess that's something at least. He was really skittish when I went to say hi to him, so I think my housemate hit or kicked him while I was gone. I had a university flatmate who was a bit nuts. It started out with her just stealing my food. I couldn't leave anything in the kitchen for more than 12 hours or she'd have it. And then she would also put passive-aggressive notes up in our kitchen calling me a liar. I have food allergies, but apparently I was making them up. She was nasty to anyone I had over. She took all of my crockery and put it on top of the cupboards so I couldn't reach it, and I had to climb up and get it all down. She then convinced all of the guys in my flat to take the kitchen furniture and pile it outside my door so I couldn't get out of my room. I got the flu and she spent a day screaming at me through the wall while I alternately cried and slept until my parents came and drove me home. It got to the point where I was considering dropping out of university, but I asked to be put in another flat as a last resort. I got moved into a flat with 5 guys and it was so much messier, but so much nicer. Some people are suggesting that I did something to make her this crazy. I didn't do anything. That's why her behavior was just not understandable in any way. I had my own friends, I kept the kitchen tidy when I used it, I didn't make noise late at night, whatever. She was just looking for a punching bag. This is maybe the second video I've done on crazy flatmates, and I can reassure the author of this story that she is by no means alone in experiencing this kind of monster. They are out there. May the flying spaghetti monster help those who bring them into their homes. My second year of school, I went to an out-of-state school, and I had to get an apartment because there was no room in campus housing for transfer students. My school provided those of us with a list of other students in the same situation so that we might get together and go in on a place to live. So I ended up just doing that with my roommate. Things were great for like 2 years, and then he started going downhill. His grades were slipping, his girlfriend dumped him, and he didn't make the golf team. Poor guy. About this time, he also stopped contributing around the apartment, like cleaning dishes, taking out the trash, buying toilet paper, and other things. I finally decided to keep my own toilet paper stashed in my room in a locked cabinet. Days went by and no toilet paper showed up in the bathroom. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into a little over a month. One day my girlfriend was over, and she had to go to the bathroom. She finished up, washed her hands, and then went to dry her hands on the towel hanging over the toilet when I heard her freak out. The underside of the towel was covered in crap stains. My roommate had been wiping his butt with the towel above the toilet and hanging it back up. I have no idea how I could never smell it. I ended up throwing the towel on his bed and leaving him a roll of toilet paper with a note that said, "I think you need this more than I do." We never spoke again after that, and then our lease was up soon after and we parted ways. I just cannot even fathom being so depressed or whatever that I would rather wipe my butt with the same towel repeatedly than buy some frickin' toilet paper. My roommate was this geeky 400-pound guy who watched Sailor Moon in the original Japanese. He had a tiny red-headed girlfriend who regularly beat the crap out of him in daily life, and he let her. At like 6 p.m. on a Thursday, he suddenly asked me if I could vacate the dorm until 11, as they're going back to have some romantic time. I was a little teed off he gave me no warning, but I left anyway. Got back at midnight and walked into a scene of her in black vinyl gear with a riding crop and a taxi driver's hat, riding him, with him covered in welts from head to toe. I noped the heck right out of there. I had a roommate who was racist and obsessed with World War II Germany. I thought it was just in a History Channel kind of way at first. He then chose to read Mein Kampf for a class. Then he started writing juvenile bathroom graffiti in German in the stalls. He became upset when he found out I dated a black girl in high school. Then the swastika graffiti started showing up in the dorm elevator, along with the N-word drawn in a noose. He had a knife collection. He seriously came back after the first week with an end table, folding chair, and an easy chair, despite the fact that the room had no real extra space for any of it. He smelled and tried to get rid of the room smell with a whole can of peach renizit one day. He left food garbage in his trash, left for the weekend, and when I emptied it because it was smelling, he got mad at me for touching his stuff. He said he'd take care of me if I did it again. He said he hated kids. He was a special ed major. I asked why he'd majored in that if he hated kids, and he said, "There are 52 special ed majors in this school, and I'm one of only 2 guys." I moved out at the start of the next semester as soon as they'd let me. I paid the extra money for a single the next year. I've just looked him up, found a picture of him in black facial makeup and some creepy black and white photos. No, there's nothing wrong with reading Mein Kampf or having a knife collection or not liking kids in and of themselves. Context, people, context. Not a college roommate, but RAF trade training. My roommate came back paralytic drunk, having spewed in the sink in the block shower room until it was so full to the brim, only then to go on and have a nice long pee all over my TV and my shiny new Xbox 360. He was very apologetic the next day, as well as very hungover, which was hilarious to watch in Fizz and Inspection Parade, and he cleaned it all up, so I forgave him for the situation.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.